I need it inside a little square. The Paledora logo is like this, so it's cut off in the middle. I need it in a square. I need you to make the box bigger so it fits inside a square shape. Okay, we are live, everybody. Pilas que el micrófono de tu cámara está apagado, papi. Pilas. Tu micrófono está apagado. Préndelo. Estaba prendido, no sé. Está apagado ahorita mismo. Okay. All right. Everybody, welcome. All right, everybody. Welcome. Happy Friday to Paledora Co.Creating Community Campus. I'm happy everybody's here. It's a beautiful day in the audience. Check it out. Everyone give us a little love. What's up, everybody? All right. So, the intention of these days is to gather beautiful minds that are seeking to regenerate our planet. And the topics that we'll discuss here are different vessels for that. Primarily regenerative communities, spaces that are self-sustaining in water, food, energy, and waste management, and have a positive impact on the surrounding areas, the communities, the environment, and specifically us humans. Today, we're going to kick off the topic and the conversation with an intro and a talk about crypto. This comes from our conversation last week, which I left up on the board, which was strategies to integrate using digital technologies like currencies and NFTs, which are digital contracts, to purchase land. A pretty hot topic in the space right now that we have some experts and magicians that have shared magic with us. And so we're going to talk about crypto to start. Our good friend Andrew Hall, a crypto coach and very excited human in the field, is going to come and share. Join us, Andrew.
Thank you, Oscar. Thank you, RegenTribe. And thank you, Paledora. How many people are on the live show?
On Facebook, seems there's 2 or 3 right now.
Okay, so mostly here.
Yeah, mostly here. If there's questions, I'll send you.
Word, thank you. Yeah, so my name is Andrew Hall. I'm a crypto coach and consultant. I've been in the crypto space since 2017-ish. And it's very interesting to me how my journey has evolved so far and how I've come full circle back with kind of what I know and the projects that are in front of me are like the original intention and the inspiration that came through in 2017 when I first understood blockchain and the power that blockchain could provide with its transparency and its sovereignty. Before that was just kind of a journey of learning about different projects and all the liquidity protocols and all the exchanges and the DeFi and all the stuff that I just call kind of hot air right now, which I think has massive potential in 10 to 15 years. But what I'm going to kind of lead us into today is back to our topic from last week of how I see that we can use crypto, blockchain, NFTs to basically fractionalize land and divide land up and to distribute value fairly and something that has real value, which is, I think we're all aware, the most valuable thing to us is ourselves, our connection to one another, our connection to the earth. And I finally see how crypto is bringing us back to that. So by a show of hands, just kind of so I can gauge everyone's understanding of crypto, who here would actually be able to explain the difference between a cryptocurrency and blockchain? Raise your hand if you think you have a good idea of the difference between crypto and blockchain. So like half the room? Okay, cool. So I think it's important to understand the base fundamentals of the technology, just to have an awareness when something comes to you, how that this new project that this person's talking about can actually align with the sovereignty and the transparency and things that we're all looking for in our organizational and governance structures. And if we go back to basically the very beginning of where money evolved from, essentially money is just a tool that's used to organize people. And when we look at a blockchain is essentially just a ledger. It's a digital ledger. It's a list of transactions. It's stored data. And I have this fancy white piece of paper here that I'm going to ask everyone to pass around, rip off a small piece, and pass the whole piece of paper to the next person. And this is essentially what a ledger, actually I'll continue with money, and then once everybody gets a piece, if you can try to save like a bigger piece at the end so that there's like, a whole left, and then you guys have the smaller pieces, because I'm going to reference those. So we started accounting, right? Back in, I don't know, 600, some thousands of years ago. We needed to account for things because we have human trade, we have to organize, we have to do things. So we started writing things down on a ledger. And then once tribes began to kind of move around, they needed accountability between tribes. They needed more larger trust systems. And this evolved into organizations that we call governments. So governments came along and said, oh, you can depend on us to store all this records and all this data and all this accounting information for you. And we can be the trusted system. And we could go into, how gold evolved and how gold was kind of the main currency at one time. And then that evolved into fractionalized banking and banking reserves, which just created basically value that doesn't really exist, basically IOUs, which we call banknotes. And so, yeah, money continued to evolve along this process. And now we have kind of money where it is today, where it's basically a bunch of fiat paper that doesn't really even exist. It's numbers and programs and in computers and in screens. And every time an organization, which we call countries, gets into a financial deficit, I guess, or financial struggle, they're just able to print more money from the central bank to bail them out, which really hurts all of us because we're the ones that are the actual organisms. We're the cells inside of these communities, inside of these organizations that are the actual value. But the way that we're attributed our value and we're recognized is currently in our bank account and then how much money that we have inside the economic system. And the ones that control these economic systems are able to just kind of inflate that, which just lowers our real value, right? So as this piece of paper is going around, I'm going to reference each piece that you have as what's called a node in the blockchain. So how a blockchain works is traditionally we have, before blockchain, everything was listed in one central place. We had centralized ledgers, centralized servers, which you could just think of where all the information about us, about our bank account, about ourself, whatever, just information about the economic system. Beautiful. Existed in a central place, like Google servers or IBM servers, wherever. So what blockchain does is it takes that central server and it breaks it up into multiple pieces and distributes that server amongst participants in the networks, or what we would call nodes. And there are nodes and then there's users. There's, I don't know, depending on which blockchain, they all have different rules and parameters. I don't really want to get into that. I don't even keep that cataloged in my mind because it's so much information. But essentially the way it works is the ledger is distributed just like you guys have a piece of the piece of paper. Imagine that this original piece of paper was the blockchain and all the data was stored on this blockchain. And each one of you have a small piece of that. Well, you're also in a line. So the way the blockchain works is that when a transaction goes through or someone requests to receive some data or give some value to the network, say I put in that transaction, well, the blockchain then begins to communicate with each person in the blockchain to verify that what I'm putting into the blockchain is actually true. And it references that with the last block confirmation that went around previous. So the block started basically the Genesis block, which is when the blockchain is launched, and it's like, okay, go. And then from there, every transaction is always linked to the previous transaction through basically what's called a hash, which is just a random string of letters and numbers. So yeah, that's how the block confirmation works. So nothing can go through the blockchain, nothing can pass through if the blocks don't verify that piece of data is correct. And then depending on the blockchain, whether it's Bitcoin or Ethereum, Solana, they all have different block confirmation methods. Some of them confirm more blocks, so there might be 21 validators, there might be 200 validators, there might be 3 validators, like with something like Binance Smart Chain. Well, I think they have 22, but anyways, that's where you go from like decentralized versus more decentralized. So if there's more people in the network that's validating the network and validating the transactions, then it's more decentralized. But the issue that you come with the bigger decentralization is scalability and speed, because now you're trying to coordinate across a larger group of people, which is going to take more time. Is this making sense to everyone so far? Cool. Yeah, so that's really what's important to know about the blockchain. Really, like it's a trustless system, meaning that you can join a network and you do not have to know other participants in the network to be able to trust the information that they're giving you. It's an immutable system, which means that anything that's ever put into the network as far as a piece of data, it stays there forever. So it can never be erased. It can never be changed unless the entire network, not the entire, a good percentage of the network agrees that they want to change that data. So what this looks like with something tangible for us is what we talked about last week with DAOs. And we'll just move on to that. We talked about DAOs and NFTs. So the issue with, and one issue with our organizational structures that we have today, one is transparency. 2 is probably, I don't know. That's a good place to ask a question. Someone tell me what they think one of the biggest problems with the organizations is today. By a raise of hands, not everyone jump at once. What's an issue we have with our current organizational structures?
They tend to be serving the interest of corporation shareholders rather than community that will comprise of that corporation.
Yeah.
It tends to be very focused towards the top. So
Hierarchy.
A hierarchical structure where the top of the hierarchy gets the lion's share of the resource and the benefits, and the lower levels. I mean, yeah, the distribution is
Not
efficient
central.
and not equality.
Yeah. Good one.
Can you repeat this, Andrew?
An issue you see with current organizational structures could be your past job, could be a country, could be here.
How data is transmitted or communicated, not transmitted, but communicated from the real value of a company to its financial value in the market, where there is very little transparency and correlation where it should be, there is none. So sometimes you have multi-million-dollar companies that have very bad organizations, but that doesn't reflect the price. Or you have very good stages of a company, and that doesn't reflect in the share value or in the market value. So there's like no transparency between these two.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. We see that in the stock market, right?
Like we talk about in organizational a lot about key performance indicators. Well, there is no company, registered or unregistered, that has ever had a correlation of its market valuation to its performance as an organization, to its execution. So people are buying more air than the actual value or know what actually a company is happening, because there's no traceability, right?
Right.
It's really
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah, that's a great point. And we see that in the stock market and how the stock prices have like zero correlation to the profitability of the company.
Exactly.
Right? Like the stock markets first started with like agriculture and betting on the future value that the crops would produce, the yield they would produce in the following season. And we're not even close to that anymore. Now stocks is just
Speculative.
it's just speculative, just like crypto.
Yeah.
So one more organizational issue we see.
Yeah, in general governance, right? Like organization, how do we vote? Like how do we make decisions? How do we make sure that everyone at all times has access to the same information and these kind of things? Major issue.
Yeah, they're all great points. Anyone else like to add anything? Yeah.
Actually, any centralized control system is vulnerable to corruption of interest. So most of what we're talking about is these are systems controlling lives, and then they're corrupted because they have a group that have an agenda. So conflict of interest is one of the issues. That's why distributed system is all part of it. There's also the inflationist side of the financial system now, the interest.
Right.
So we're breaking that with cap, for example, Bitcoin and stuff like that. It's anti-inflation. That is also a big issue. Also, creating debts out of thin air.
What's your name?
All right.
Moran? Thank you, Moran. Moran was saying, just to repeat what he was saying, he's that the hierarchy of centralization of power corrupts whoever's at the top. And it's just human nature. You know, it's not, for me, the way I see it, I think that, you know, George Washington was a pretty cool guy. I think Thomas Jefferson was probably one of the most iconic, influential freedom leaders that we've ever had. And they had, I think, amazing intentions with democracy and with the Declaration of Independence. If you guys are familiar with Robert Hawkins' work, he actually did a muscle kinesiology test on the document, the Declaration of Independence. And that article or the document itself is like one of the most highest consciousness pieces of articles that's ever been written in like human history. So what I'm saying with that is like the intentions were fucking pure. But what happened is we didn't have the technology to be able to distribute our governance and make choices collectively. We tried, like with the senators, right? Like, which made sense at the time. Let's have circles here and there, and then they'll have representatives, and then all the representatives will meet and represent everyone. But then we have corporations come in, and they're much closer to the representatives than we are, and they can incentivize with
Lobbying.
money, lobbyists, exactly. So with blockchains and decentralized organizations, that's much, much more difficult, because even if that was to happen, we could just collectively create an entire new organization and strip the power out from underneath this one. But even before it gets to that point, you could just choose to vote out this person. Hey, they're not representing us. They're not leading us like we want. Let's raise a proposal and move them down so they have less power, or just completely remove them from the organization.
So then a system with no incentives to be transparent and fair, and not incentives to be, I guess, getting ahead of the other to go to the top, because it's that's the structure of it. In this way, since it's circular, there's no really incentive to move up anywhere, because there's no one to move up unless you all move up.
Yeah, it's distributing the wealth amongst the entire organization, and that wealth distribution is equated to the amount of energy someone is willing to put into the organization, and the value that they want to provide. So it's a more transparent exchange. Yeah.
Okay, so part of the kind of initiative to share a moment of crypto is to introduce the topics of what is cryptocurrency, general idea of how it works, and more so how it can start to be implemented in this concept of land stewardship, community creation, and governance, of course. And with this, we have invited Andrew here because Andrew has a nice program where he coaches people into the workup to using crypto, right? Share with us, what are some of the basic things that someone who has no experience with crypto, anyone in here, no experience at all, doesn't own, doesn't have, okay, what would be the basic first steps for someone to get integrated with that? From a really high level, like do this, and now you're in the space.
Open up your phone, go to the App Store, and download a MetaMask wallet, a Phantom wallet, and FTX.
Right. So these are wallets, right? Just like opening a bank at Bank of America or Scotiabank, BBVA, and another bank. Each one of these banks or wallets holds certain kinds of coins or allows you to use certain kinds of these currencies that exist. All right. So that was the first step.
It's essentially an interface, right? Just like we have Instagram. Like your Instagram account, you have to start to be able to interface with the entire community of Instagram. Same thing with crypto. For every crypto network, you have to have an interface to be able to interact with that specific crypto network. And by network, I mean so we have like layer one blockchains, which you could think of like the internet. So imagine like HTTPS, the World Wide Web, is like a layer one for the internet structure. And I'm like looking this way because these were like the new people over here. And then all the applications that run on top of the blockchain would be equivalent to a website, right? So there's multiple different layer ones. Like I don't know how many there are now, probably like 1,000 or something. But each one of them, you have to have like a different wallets, for the most part, to interact with, or a different setup inside of the same wallet. So basically, to simplify it, you need an interface with the blockchain, and then you need value in your wallet to be able to exchange that inside of the community. And it doesn't necessarily even have to be like investing. It can be just to join a DAO. You need, for example, Solana. You need like $5 of Solana just to be able to process transaction fees. And basically, what you're doing is because it's decentralized, every time you want to interact with the community or the blockchain, there has to be that what do we call it? The block confirmation thing that we talked about. That has to go through, and we have to incentivize everyone that's holding a piece of the blockchain to confirm that, right? Everyone has to have some type of mutual benefit. So that's why there's transaction fees. When we talk about proof of stake, but there's also transaction fees of proof of work, which is a whole nother thing. So that's why you need some type of value in the wallet to be able to transact. Is that kind of the
So step one, get a wallet, right? Step two, the beautiful thing with crypto is you can buy any amount, right? You don't have to buy one Bitcoin that's at like $40,000. You can buy 0.000001 Bitcoin, $4 worth of Bitcoin, or 0.0001, $40, or etc. as you range up to it. So yeah, as Andrew stated, you need some amount of money in that wallet so you can begin to interact with the others that are on that network. Just like if you have an Instagram account, you can connect with other people using Instagram. If you have a Twitter account, you can interact with other people using a Twitter account. It's the same with these kinds of wallets that he mentioned. Some of those are MetaMask, Phantom Wallet. What was another one you mentioned?
I was going to mention FTX. So I would link, you'll need, I encourage people to have decentralized wallets, which are the Phantom and MetaMask, which are wallets that you own. So an important thing to understand is private keys, because that's where we get into like the actual sovereignty of your value. And sometimes I like skip over this because it's so ingrained in me that I actually forget to explain it to people. But the private key is essentially your fingerprint. It's your identity for your wallet that links you to how the blockchain sees you, right? So going back to the piece of paper, let's say this piece of paper, this main piece of paper is the organization as a whole. This organization could be a DAO. This could be Bitcoin. This could be the Bitcoin network that operates. Well, each piece of paper that you have a private key that links you to this whole organization. And that private key, or it could be an NFT, defines your relationship to the organization as a whole. And the private key is, like I said, is completely unique to you. And this identifies any value that you have stored in the blockchain. Now, something like a KuCoin, FTX, Coinbase, something like a centralized exchange, the exchange itself holds all of your private keys, making it more easier for you. Maybe not really, but that's the kind of the general idea. It's more user friendly, but it's really not even so. Like I can open a MetaMask wallet, write down my 12 words, and I'm sovereign, and I have all my funds and my private keys. But it's like a thing, right? So when he mentioned the Instagram account, so the same way you need an email to verify your Instagram, you'll need a centralized exchange to like connect you to the banking system. As far as I know, there's not really, unless you do it like peer to peer, unless someone comes to me and is like, hey, I want to buy $1,000 worth of Bitcoin, and I give them 1,000 US. I give them $1,000 of Bitcoin and they give me $1,000. There's no way to skip like getting funds from a bank account into crypto. So there's basically a centralized bridge that we need for now. So that's the FTX. That's a centralized exchange that you'll have to give like what's called KYC, which is stands for know your customer, which is where you basically confirm your identity just like you would with a bank account. And then from there, you can purchase a small amount of Bitcoin, crypto, and either store it there, or you can send it to a decentralized wallet where you have ownership of it. You have the sovereignty aspect of the value and the funds. And yeah, that's kind of where, we should be focused, is more of complete ownership of all of our value and all of our funds, which when it comes to NFTs and everything like that, pretty much most of it is decentralized. So kind of are forced to move in that direction. Is there anything else because I wanted to make a connection with organisms and organizations and NFTs using this.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
So I talked about how the blockchain could be the organization as a whole, and your pieces of paper are like your wallet, which has your private keys in it. Think of a private keys wallet, basically the same thing. And that defines your relationship to the blockchain itself. Now, when we talk about NFTs and organizations, which we covered last week, let's say that this piece of land here, and this is a community. This is like a palapa in a mescal and cornfield, it looks like. Let's say there's a huge community here, which is the organization. There's 100 people that live here. They're all making different decisions and doing their organizational things. And then you have the NFT, right? Now the NFT is sitting over here, which is also your private key. It's your wallet. It's your relationship to the organization, to the whole organization, the same way that an individual cell in your body has a relationship to your entire body. And I think this is the power of blockchain, and where we finally break into complete sovereign, decentralized governance systems that are tied to something that's actually valuable. I think Bitcoin was the best, it was the first example, basically, of a decentralized organization. Ethereum was great. It allows us to put applications on it and do things with that. But what I'm seeing, and with what's coming before me, just by like expanding to this and the projects that are offering for me to basically build, is that if we can tie land, I think this is where I want to wrap up. If we can, as we tie land into decentralized organizations and fractionalize the land into NFTs, we have thus created an entire new economic system that is based on the value that we see in the land. So that's the same way that the price of Bitcoin fluctuates. The price of anything fluctuates is based on the buy and sell orders in the market. But if land has a agreed upon basically floor price, we can basically stabilize the value of our economy. And then there's also other ways that we could get into that are like creative tokenomic ideas to then create passive income for all the NFT holders. So you don't necessarily have to be like, oh, I have an NFT, but it's not really making, a 10x gain like, my crypto would. There's other ways to do that. That's possible, but voila. But yeah, that's what I think is valuable in the space. And that's where my intentions are. And yeah, all the other crypto stuff is fun too and exciting, but it doesn't really mean anything, right? It's just like protocols on top of layers, on top of liquidity, on top of, giving returns back to the community and then creating this cool project. And yeah, I think that's, the more that we can tie the decentralized aspect, the transparency, the sovereignty, tie those concepts and aspects into community, into land, kind of merging these two worlds, I think we can literally just like create a new world, a new economy that we control, we govern. We decide, oh, this is actually working really well. Let's keep doing this. Or this doesn't work so well, so let's not do this anymore. It could be like that easy, right? Any questions?
I would like to pick up on, so Oscar kind of summed up two points for like a beginner crypto step. So you have a wallet, and what is like you talk a lot? They talk a lot about strategy. What is the strategy that you recommend for people that are just taking baby steps in crypto? Is it like buy
Hey, 10 different layer 1 blockchains, hold them. Example, Ethereum, Solana, Avalanche, Phantom. Telos is like one that's really, like, because my seeds people are here. Telos is one that's like playing down in the shadows and nobody really knows about them, but they're like doing like a ton of cool stuff. So the layer 1s are basically where everything else is built on top of. Every NFT project, every DeFi protocol, every other thing that comes into crypto is going to be built on top of a layer 1 blockchain. So I think those are going to make, from an investor standpoint, I think those will make the most profitability. If history repeats itself, Solana did like a 120x or something, went from like $1 to $250 last year. So that's what layer 1s are doing. Also, Matic did a very similar return. Interoperability is something to also understand in the space, because I'm talking about all these different layer 1s. You have 200 different blockchains that are all separate and have their own separate ecosystems. Now the next step is interoperating, where all these blockchains can all interact simultaneously. All the communities, all the NFTs, all the DeFi becomes one fluid system, and we don't have to go through like these weird bridge systems. So that's what I would say is understands the concept of interoperability, right? Interoperable is for things to be able to relate to one another seamlessly. Investing, you're asking for like, download a wallet. You can easily do that with Coinbase. You can pretty much buy all those on Coinbase, but it's super centralized and it's all going to be tracked. And if you're worried about privacy and taxes and things like that, probably not the best place to do it. My method would be to open one centralized place, or just find a way to buy Bitcoin from peer to peer. And then go make like one massive purchase of Bitcoin, whether you want to invest 50K, and then move that into a decentralized wallet and make all your trades in a decentralized wallet like MetaMask. And then for storage, you can store that. There's a wallet called Exodus. I know if you're new, like this is a lot of things and there's already like complication there, but
So we'll be posting this video on our channels, and we'll be doing a summary of all these topics and these keywords in there, so you guys can check it out and follow up on it afterwards.
if you go to my Instagram account, Crypto Love Ninja, there's a link in my Instagram bio, and there's a free mini course. Everything that I've covered with you today is in my mini course and has all the links to all the wallets, all the exchanges, everything that I'm sharing with you. And then I also have other courses and content that are paid. Then you can also book a private call with me, one-on-one. We can work together. But yeah, that's the simple thing is like you're going to need one place to tether your bank account, go from fiat into crypto, and then from there you want to take that crypto and distribute it into your quote-unquote portfolio. I did tell Oscar I was going to do a market update, so I think that would be
we have
pretty
about
valuable
20
to
minutes
people.
left before we kick off the focused community creation workshops. Our two community founders are here, Nathan and Cassandra. They'll be presenting with us the topic of master plans next. So yeah, let's do this 20 minutes. I'd like to recap on this topic. We have the speakers that joined us last week as well to kind of integrate this crypto 101. Now that we know a bit about what these digital assets are, how they work, how we can use them, now it's nice to integrate and practical application it, how buying a crypto token translates to potentially owning a piece of land and your house on it. Or how, if you have a piece of land, you can sell properties on it through tokens, how we just described, through this process. So we'll touch on that for a few minutes. Yeah, let's do the market update.
Before moving on, does anyone have any questions about how like cryptocurrency might work, how wallets, how they're all related? Any questions on what I've kind of gone through so far?
No, but I have a good suggestion that helped me. CoinGecko, which is actually just a platform where you can just see all the cryptocurrencies, and then you can just click on it and go on the website and just look at the different crypto companies to see what you're involved in investing. So that was helping me also to see like 1 month, 2 years, 10 years, just to see how the crypto was rising and falling, just to get an idea of what I might want to invest in.
Totally, yeah. She's sharing basically a crypto index. She shared CoinGecko. There's also another one called CoinMarketCap.com. I also talk about that in my mini course, but it's basically a website where you can see all the crypto projects, and then you can actually click on one coin, and it gives you everything about that: the price, the market cap, the exchange you can buy it on, a little bio about the coin, where to find the team, where to connect with the Discord, Twitter, all the things. So it's a really great resource. That's CoinMarketCap.com or CoinGecko. Any other questions? Cool. You guys care about like the market? Like, the price is going?
Yeah, it
Okay.
really fell.
Yeah, I haven't even looked at it today. I quit looking at it after like last week when it made the previous to last drop to 38,000. So basically, the way the market works is everything follows Bitcoin. I take that back. I try to be very specific with my words. Not everything follows Bitcoin. 95% of everything in crypto follows Bitcoin. And the reason, I don't actually fully understand the reason anymore, other than just illogical market action. But the reason it was back in 2017 was because Bitcoin was the gateway currency. To buy any other cryptocurrency, you had to buy Bitcoin. And there was also more faith in Bitcoin because it was the first one. All the crypto OGs, worship Bitcoin, and then you have all these other coins that wasn't really doing anything. But still today, we still follow that same philosophy where the general market follows the price of Bitcoin. So when we, as an investor and a trader and a coach, when I'm talking to my private clients or I'm giving a live stream, we mostly look at Bitcoin. We look at Bitcoin, and then we also look at the total market cap, which is the price action of the entire crypto market cap as a whole, or the entire crypto market as a whole. And what Bitcoin is doing right now is it's basically, like I said, I haven't looked at the chart today, but yesterday it was falling back towards the support level that is right at $38,000, which is also tested previously twice before, which typically means that it's not going to hold as support. Because the more that a certain level is tested, the weaker that it gets. Because if it tested one time and there's strong buyer support there, it doesn't need to go back. There's strong support, or there's strong buyer, what's the word? Buyer interest, basically. That it doesn't really need to go back to that price, right? Because as it comes back, there's a lot of buyers here, so they're going to be buying it before it reaches that price again. But when a coin is constantly hitting a certain price, Bitcoin does this all the time. Like back in 2017 or back in 2018, it fell to like $6,000, and then we go from 6,000 to 15K over the course of several months. But it kept going back to $6,000, and it created almost like this triangle structure where the bottom of the triangle is 6K, and then just kept, it forms like this wedge. And then everyone's like super bullish, but it's like there's support there that's eventually not going to hold. And then it fell through, and it went all the way to like 3,000. It does the same thing in the reverse order when it goes back up. It'll hit 6K and bounce off, test it a few more times, and then break through. So you have support and resistance zones and price action. And basically those are where price is just confluence. Price, reacts to a certain area over and over again. And that's what we define as support and resistance. And basically Bitcoin is at 37,000. It's likely going to fall through this. It's already tested, I think 36 or 35 something. So it's likely not going to hold there. The next level is like 30, but I don't even see it holding there because there's just not enough volume. There's several indicators that we can use, but I just don't see the volume coming in there. I think that from my perspective, my understanding, 28K is a maybe, 24K is more likely, and then 20K is like if it goes lower than 20K, then we're kind of in shit right now. But 24K, there's also a futures gap that hasn't been closed. So I think what we're going to see is just a kind of a slow grind down to 24K over the next few months. And then maybe by the time like September, October, November, that area, we potentially be in a bull market again. But I'm also noticing some other projects that I'll share with you that are completely different than the rest of the market. One of those is Waves, which is another layer 1 blockchain. It's proof of stake. I haven't really kept too much update with the community, but last time I was looking at it, it's like a big DeFi ecosystem on Waves. And it's done like it's up 200% in the last 2 weeks. So it could possibly be a decent investment. Once Bitcoin makes its volatile spike down, Waves will probably drop another 50%, and it might be a good opportunity to jump in that. I can't confirm that because I basically have to wait and see the price action. The other project that I think is really cool is Luna, which is another layer 1 that has some really, really, really interesting tokenomics behind it, because we have stable coins in the crypto ecosystem, which is basically just a currency that's pegged to the dollar. But there are a couple being UST, which is the stable token on the Luna blockchain, has a very interesting tokenomics in that every time that a dollar worth of UST is minted, which means it's created, it's brought into existence onto the blockchain, the equivalent amount of Luna has to be burnt, which means it's erased from the blockchain, erased from existence. And Luna has a fixed supply, so that means every time this token is burnt, it becomes deflationary. Now, I don't think the price action is completely equivalent to that tokenomic. I think it's more like investors are seeing the value in that, and they're seeing they're speculating on the future price of it. But Luna's at an all-time high right now, when the rest of the market is fixing to basically collapse, drop another 30 to 40%. Luna's hitting its all-time high. And that's possibly because, people are moving into UST, and it's creating more UST, therefore burning more Luna. You can also, inside of that ecosystem, you can also stake UST, which is where you just click a button in your wallet. And that UST can be put on a platform called Anchor Protocol, which gives you about 20% APY on a stablecoin. Disclaimer on that, there is risk, and it's not the value that they're giving you. People always ask, well, where's that 20% coming from? It's actually Anchor Protocol's reserves that are paying that 20% out right now. It's not sustainable, but it is something that you can take advantage of right now. And then they're working in the future to create basically a huge DeFi ecosystem where that type of return become sustainable on a stable coin. So yeah, that's a project that I think is super interesting as far as price action right now. Has a really cool decentralized stablecoin as well. Yeah, any questions on market stuff?
I have a question. Do you personally move the money? So when you know it's on the ultimate high, that you've taken it out, and when it's low, you buy it new, or you just letting it sit? And
I intend to do that. That's very high and very low, but the challenge is the emotions. Yeah, and I have like
Just call it first average.
I have a portfolio that just sits there. Most don't show me, or don't shun me, but most of it's in XRP. Is my older portfolio, because it's like that's my Hail Mary basically. And yeah, so I have 50% that's just kind of sitting aside that I don't touch, and then the other half I trade, live off of, play around with, buy NFTs. But yeah, mostly that whole stack that's my trading stack that I call it is all sitting in stable coins right now. Yeah, good question.
All right, so Andrew, beautiful presentation. And so again, the purpose of this was, in our workshop last week, we introduced the topic of using NFTs, digital currencies, and combining it with the purpose of these workshops, creating communities. Our workshop last week was about land stewardship, finding land, buying land, co-owning land, and preparing it and building on it. Right. We realized that it's prudent of us to do soft introductions, high level of what is crypto, how you can get involved with crypto, and most importantly, how it is implemented into creating communities. What we discussed last week in a quick summary was these crypto tokens we're talking about, a variation of a crypto token that is now called an NFT. It's a little more complicated than just a token, but it's essentially a mini contract. You can own one of these mini contracts. With one of these mini contracts, you enter a digital organization. It's called a DAO. Your mini contract gives you access to make votes in this organization. The magic that was shared with us with Andoni was that corporations here in Mexico have the ability to point at one of these digital organizations as the stakeholders, the owners of that company. So this is this Mexican company here. They can point at this digital organization that is entered by owning one of these digital currency NFTs. And obviously this Mexican company can then buy with a contract a piece of land. So again, high level, it takes a few runs to really get a hold of it, but this is the magic that's unfolding here and in lots of places around the world. In the US, there's a group of guys trying to buy a basketball team, right? That's worth tens of millions of dollars with a DAO. Same concept. They buy a digital contract. They're represented in the digital organization. A physical contract in the physical world points to that digital organization, and that physical contract is owned by a physical corporation in the real world. So now we're in this phase where the physical world has always existed. The digital world is now existing and building tools. The magic is to connect these two worlds, and that's what's currently happening. And this is why we have Andrew here to introduce the basics and the introduction. Every week we'll do a new topic, maybe based on something that we all have questions about and would like to know. Andrew will be sharing topics and giving us market updates. And then we're going to step into community creation. Today we have two wonderful presenters, Nathan Wakeford, who is starting the Mother Tree, a community west of Tulum, and Cassandra, who is the founder of Tierras Nativas. And she is starting a 66-hectare community close to Puerto Morelos on the Ruta to Cenotes. They'll be presenting to us today the topic of master plan, right? So what is a master plan? Who knows? Master plans? Anyone? Not you two, but everyone else? Anyone else? Master plans, right? Just like a business, is the strategy that you're laying out ahead of time for what you will be creating. Everything goes on there, from the permaculture plan to the construction plan to the architecture of the houses you can put in there, everything that you'll need to build and create this community. As a team, we've been exploring what this looks like. We have a resources folder that we've shared and we'll share with everyone with examples of different master plans. Today, Nathan and Cassandra will be sharing. We're going to give Nathan the floor first to share about Mother Tree so we understand what his project is. And then he'll be sharing with us a bit about his process with MasterPlan. Cassandra will do the same afterwards. And then they'll share a discussion like a mastermind where everyone's encouraged to ask questions, share experiences, and come to general understanding of if you're creating your own community, how would you do it? Because this is the intention of these workshops. In the 11 weeks that we're hosting is to turn a plan of just a piece of land and go through all the conceptual understanding and main points that allow us to turn this into an actual community space where people live and grow food and live sustainably. So up first is Nathan Whitford. Welcome, Nathan.
Thank you, Andrew.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. Amazing presentation. Crypto, guys, it's an important topic. Just like we've seen the digital world consume the physical world, it's happening with everything. It's happened with even flashlights. Who has an actual flashlight anymore? Nobody. It's in our phones. It's digital now. Same with money. Yeah. Okay, so Nathan, welcome, brother. Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for making time. The Mother Tree.
It's like the mothership. I've never heard of it like the Facebook or the Mother Tree. But it's the Mother Tree. How is everybody? Good. Can everybody stand up for a second?
Yes.
Pat interrupt.
Oh.
And for a second, just open yourself up to receive. Take a deep breath. And just breathe as much of the present moment in as you can. Until you feel yourself fully here with me. Because this transmission isn't really from me, it's going to be from you, so you can receive whatever it is that's meant to come from me to you. Thank you. Give yourself a pat on the back, and give the person next to you a pat on the back. There we go. Just say we're all connected. So thank you for allowing me some space to express, hey, what we're creating, co-creating at Mother Tree. I knew something like 2016. I knew that I'd be creating a community. I didn't know, and I knew it was going to be. I knew that I'd be moving to Mexico back in 2016. I have a certain intuition to certain things. At that time, I was very much invested in a company that I founded in Australia. It was a global tea company. And fortune had it, I was at Burning Man, and then the vision started to become even more crystal in my mind. And I knew that I knew it was going to be in Tulum, or near Tulum, actually inland from Tulum, and I'd never been to Tulum. I just intuitively knew. I kept getting these signs. And I knew that the land would come to us, but I knew that I wouldn't have to reach the land. And so as fortune took us, I was doing a dieta in the Amazon rainforest with ayahuasca, with the Kuntanawa tribe in a very, very remote part of the Brazilian Amazon rainforest. And at the end of that dieta, about 10 days, I did some healing work with a woman who was filming a documentary of the Kuntanawa tribe, who were mobilizing themselves with other community or tribal members to preserve the rainforest that was getting destroyed, the Amazon. There's a lot of fires burning, and they were very concerned because that was their way of life. And this lady, her name is Kumiko, I don't mind sharing. She's a dear friend now. I mentioned the desire that I was coming after after Brazil, I was going to go to Mexico, and I was going to, I was interested in buying land, but and she said, well, you know what, I've got I've got some people that I know in Mexico who are on the medicine path and who might be able to help you. There's a particular gentleman that's been working for the last 14 years, 15 years with the Mayans and with the Ejido. I said, that sounds kind of aligned. All right, let's check it out. And I didn't actually get to, as fortune also had it, we got delayed on our flight out of Brazil, and I never got to spend any time in Tulum. I ended up going back to America. Some months later, Taj, the co-creator of Mother Tree, had a miscarriage. And it got me thinking about the community again. And at the time, I was thinking, where would I want my children to live? And this will tie back into master plan very shortly. Your master plan's going to be defined by what's important to you. What do you value? And it's something that's becomes very tangible, but it's intangible, maybe in your mind. But this place reflects a master plan of the person who created it, whether it was intentional or whether it wasn't. And you'll visit when you go to many, many different, communities that are around Tulum. You'll start to feel something of the intentions of the creator of that particular community, or the seed, the genesis, the idea that's created that will reflect a little bit about who that person is and what they stand for and what's important to them. So what I'm sharing is part of my idea, the conception that was coming through, and it's not just me, there's many other people that have been involved in this, the creation of Mother Tree, but it was a place that was going to be of safety. And Taj came up with the name Mother Tree, and ultimately it's going to be a meeting point. When I have visualizations of what's a mother tree, I actually go to Africa where everybody's under the shade of this huge tree, where it's a place of safety, it's a place of information sharing, whether it be school or education. It's a place where maybe you share food. And I was thinking, yeah, that seems to be symbolic or a beautiful analogy of the vision that I have for what Mother Tree can be. So it's a place of abundance, and it's a place of safety, and it's a place of sovereignty. And I think perhaps different to some, bringing it back to the point of you'll feel the intention and agenda of the person who's the seed of the genesis of the creation of the community by how they plan and distribute the land and the portions they ascribe to that. So Mother Tree, I'll go through the actual physical master plan aspect of our whole master plan shortly. And you'll see it's probably quite different to the way that a lot of communities have been established. So I'll jump into that. And the other part, so I was talking about safety, sovereignty. I ultimately feel that we are at the cusp, if you like, of a challenge, of a crisis. And the Chinese word for crisis or challenge also means opportunity. So we're at an opportunity point for humanity. And you hear, obviously, Oscar and the RegenTribe talking about what is regenerative. And for me, that's something that's regenerative to the human spirit. It's regenerative to the health and well-being of people, physically and emotionally. And I think as we go into a time of crisis, being in a place where you can feel at home, you can feel safe, you can feel that everything's provided for, it's a nurturing environment, is going to become so critical. And even just a place where you can experience joy, connection, human touch. So much of the last 2 years has been so much separation, segregation. And so what happens if we create, with our intention, with every single aspect, something that restores that, restores the connection, restores trust in each other, restores trust in our ability to create with our own intentions, that we're not governed by other sources that determine our state of affairs and our state of being. What happens if we reclaim the power to do that ourselves? So we do tick a lot of the boxes that Oscar's talking about in terms of being energy, water, and food independent, and I'm also adding economically independent, and obviously resource utilization or reutilization is part of that as well. So you probably can't see what's up on my screen unless you have in front of you.
Yeah, if you guys want to jump on your phones, we're streaming live right now on YouTube. Just check RegenTribe, and you'll be able to see the presentation in full effect. The projector, it's not very bright, so it's better on your phones. You'll get more access to it.
I also shared the link in the RegenTribe WhatsApp group. So
share the link to the YouTube. You share the link to
for those of you that are in there, it's the easiest access. Yeah, it's there already.
There'll be many options. So I'll wait for a second and put your hand up if you've already figured it out and you're in there and you can see our beautiful master plan. For those that haven't got the hand up, look to the person beside you.
Yeah, I'm happy to share my screen with.
Yeah, if you guys want to jump in and see someone else's screen.
Yeah, you can go on YouTube and check RegenTribe or Facebook RegenTribe. It's streaming on both.
So Facebook or YouTube RegenTribe, or you can look over somebody's shoulder who's already got it. Because it's going to be important that you see what I'm showing you for this little next section. Okay.
Right, this is the master plan, right? Mm-hmm.
This is the physical master plan, but the greater master plan, I'll be talking in a few extra slides. So understand that this has been a process of evolution in myself. The initial vision that I had has been augmented by those who I'm co-creating with. And as I evolve as a soul and spirit and see the world differently, what becomes important. So ultimately, the master plan for the physical master plan is broken up into different areas. So we have a commercial area, we have an agricultural area, we have a ceremonial area, an entertainment area, and a residential area. Okay, the property is around 12 hectares, and around at least 2/3 of that is dedicated towards communal function, not just strictly like a residential function. If you see a lot of communities, residential communities, eco-resort communities, the vast proportion of how they distribute or allocate the land is towards the sale of the land. So you can see that the intent or the agenda of the person creating that community was to sell blocks of land. There's no judgment in that. It's just more about that's their desires. Our intention was to be a place that was fully providing of those people in that side community where we can live independently, where we can live autonomously, if you like, of the external surrounds if we needed to, but still the opportunity to operate, exchange, do commerce, everything outside of the community. But it's essentially an entirely self-sufficient community if we desire it to be. That's the intention. We won't be there fully because there's certain aspects, like even solar power, for me, is not entirely sustainable because you have to buy batteries after all. So there's going to be aspects which are a work in progress. So yes.
How many family or people?
We've sold we're up to nearly 75% sold.
But,
and there's 12 plots of land, 13 plots of land currently.
But full capacity, how many families?
It's going to be extending. So that's not a defined answer. But at the moment, 13 families. But realistically, probably 30 to 40 families, I guess, eventually.
And how much hectare do you?
12 hectares. So we did something a little different. We started in our master plan with the agricultural area, right? It wasn't about, we are about building facilities and the amenities first for the community before we sell the plots of land. Which, if you think about it, it builds trust of those coming in that they already see infrastructure. And part of our value for community is that those who buy plots of land have access to the food that's being produced there. So the intention is to be potentially obtaining something like 80 to 90% of the food that we'll be using that we'll be consuming in the environment will be sourced from the land. Certain things, because I have a passion for not destroying lots of jungle, like corn, like grains and rice and certain things like that, which consumed in larger quantities, will be sourcing from a network of other farms that we're part of. So we get to share. We have a solution for that, our own decentralized distribution, if you like, of the food network. I'll talk about that part of MasterPlan a bit later on. If you notice that it's built on Fibonacci spirals. So why would we do that? And you can see I've got a little Fibonacci spiral on what I'm wearing as well. It's because the Fibonacci or golden mean ratio, which is reflected in the Fibonacci spiral, represents harmony in creation. When something's creating in harmony with the blueprint of the universe, it conforms to the golden mean ratio. So we as people have structures that are in coherence, if you like, with the golden mean ratio. So for me, that's something that's imbued into everything that's been created. You'll see the Fibonacci ratio, golden mean, Fibonacci spiral and golden mean ratio through the architecture. You'll see that if you come to visit Mother Tree, which you're welcome to, we don't use a lot of squares. There's arched roofs. There's a lot of curved lines. And that's because purely angular tends to be a slightly more sharp, masculine in some ways. Not even necessarily masculine, but it just tends to be a sharper, less flowing feeling, at least that I experience in my body. What I choose to experience is something that has structure, has form, but there's also a flow that happens to it. And all the paths are paths that we've typically chosen because there was natural pathways through the forest. We are building on no more than 15% of our entire plot. So we're preserving a jungle feel. And as you walk through the Mother Tree lands, you get the feeling you're in jungle the whole time. And you'll go from one place, one little nook of an experience around a certain thing, whether it's the agro tunnel, then you'll walk through the jungle and you find the wellness area, and you'll walk through somewhere else and you'll find the tea house. And I'll explain the amenities that we have there as well shortly. There's also built-in places of convergence. So when everything's spread and disassociated, there tends not to be a focal point of energy or a focal point of convergence where people interact and communicate. So intentionally in the design from the residential area, there's a point of convergence, right? That brings people together. We can't help but bumping into the person, your neighbor. So we've got privacy built into the structure, but we've also got interactivity built into the structure. If you choose to participate in the community, you're going to run into somebody because of the way we're bringing things together. And there's a meeting place that will be built because we are our own entertainment, we are our own education, is the way that we're building it into this model. So we're very much, and I'll talk about this in some later slides, the physical Mother Tree represents the organic manifestation of a circular economy, where we have an etheric, it will ultimately be a metaverse project that is a synthetic, non-organic, that will be brought back to the physical. And we see this Mother Tree plan will kind of be an open source thing that will be spreading these to other people that desire to create in a fashion to what we're creating. And so we have these distinct areas that are also built in, understanding that there's areas that are public and areas that are semi-private and areas that are private. So the residential areas are private. Then we have semi-private, which is things like the tea house and places where people want to meet, like our swimming hole, our tea house, that are non-commercial, just purely for the residents and their guests if they wish to bring them in. And then we have public areas, which would be like the commercial area. And that's where people get to experience something of Mother Tree. There's an exchange of resources that can take place there. And it's built that in our circular economy in a physical sense, if you're delivering seminars, workshops, if you're a healer, because we have a healing center, that's something where those gifts can be created, and there'll be a DAO, which I'll talk about later on, from the resources generated in the community that will then fund resources, equipment for the community, whether it's cars, planes, vehicles, and boats, whatever it might be. So I'll talk a little bit about the amenities next. And so you'll see some of the things. I was like, well, if I was wanting to live in a secure environment which provided the majority of my needs, what would that look like? So we have a tea house, we have a healing temple, we have an observation deck, co-working space, outdoor amphitheater for music events, wellness area with outdoor gym and sauna, an entertainment dome for seminars and events, a marketplace, recreational and relaxation areas like jungle hammocks, gazebos, chime gardens, communal eating areas, fire pits and sweat like a temescal. We have an agro tunnel, permaculture food forest walks, and a butterfly garden. And there's little bits of our story, of our history woven in to, so we have a butterfly garden, for instance, because Taj, she had, part of the reason how we identified the land was when we came to visit the first time, there was 5 blue morpho butterflies that came up to us as we toured the property. And Taj keeps a framed blue morpho butterfly on her altar. And that was our sign to say, oh, that this is where we're meant to be. So you'll see the entertainment dome in that little oval shape, you know, so the structure, you'll see the curved roofs and what have you. And the way we're creating it, there's many, you're starting to see more of the master plan that comes through. We're very much call it a premium, but really an abundance conscious community. We're not approaching it as a temporary, we're very much approaching it to be permanence in the way we're building our structures. We're approaching it in a way where it's attracting people of high affluence, people who are wealth conscious, or people that are able to combine their resource. I'm searching for a big word that my mouth could produce at that moment. So this is actually the 5-bedroom home that we'll see, and it's actually built on the Fibonacci spiral. You'll see this spiral staircase that's at the front. That's actually an energetic generating device with a copper dome. So built into the buildings themselves are essentially ether generating or frequency generating, harmonious frequency generating devices. And the idea being is that the buildings themselves should create some sort of sense of well-being within you just by being there. So essentially the model is we have turnkey solutions for people coming in. We have mini spiral homes, large spiral homes, like 2, 3, 4, and 5-bedroom homes, A-frame cabanas. Because in the commercial area, we also have an accommodation, which is both cabanas and glamping style A-frame looking tents that we'll have there as well. They're all turnkey solution. You can just literally walk in with solar. The 5-bedroom has its own little tea area, because obviously I talked about my passion for tea, rooftop hot tub, outdoor entertaining and dining areas, outdoor breakfast bar areas. They're super cool things. This 5-bedroom also is built like families. So it has, dividing the kids' room, it has a wardrobe with a cubby house above built into, so kids can play, and later on there could be a separate area for storage and what have you. So it's a really cool thing. This is the spiral home. It's got a different feel. You see even the walls got slight curvature to the walls. And just for, how am I doing for time?
We're good. We're 15 minutes in, 18 minutes in.
Okay, because I want to leave some time for questions. And whatever.
Yeah.
So I've given you kind of the physical representation of the mother tree ecosystem, right? And so we're creating this regenerative ecosystem. What does that look like? And I talked about we have the physical and the non-physical. If you look in the center, the mother tree community is what I've described. I was thinking, how do we become sustainable? How do we actually truly become sustainable in longevity? And as first I was thinking at the level of, at Mother Tree, we can create some products because we're doing an NFT project with a group called Humans I Trust for bees. We're going to be the first NFT bee project. I'm going to be putting in 20 beehives at Mother Tree.
Is that BCBs? BCBs?
No, it's different. Yeah. So it's part of a larger ecosystem that we're creating of our own, that I can describe. So it's like, okay, we're going to be generating our own honey. We're growing our own. We'll have surplus food more than likely because we're producing food for like 100 people, but there's only going to be 30 to 40 people living on the land initially. And I was thinking very much at the practical, physical level. And then I started thinking of, we're going to have all these seminars, events, concerts, workshops, everything. That's going to be a lot of content created. and I was just getting to NFTs. I'm like, oh, okay. So maybe the community can also be producing, creative content, and then we can sell that, and then that could be, because my objective is actually not to sell land. If you like, the land's the entry point. My objective is actually to create free living for those people on the land, where free gas, free security, free food, everything's supported by the community for the community. And that's where I'm going to talk to the pet cat guys a bit later on. Because I want to create essentially where, utopian environment, everything's provided for the people that are part of it. So I then started thinking of, wow, okay, so it's bigger than I initially thought. And what does that look like? And so we went initially, and what I love about, and I'm experiencing this today, a convergence of once you paint a vision or an idea and you hold it, that it'll happen, you start to attract those, call it the ingredients that are necessary to create it. And so I met this guy, Jerry, I don't mind mentioning his name, who is an Amish man who had been working on this online platform for the last year and a half. And he'd already built a marketplace, an online marketplace for the Amish community who are not really computer interactive, So it's kind of ironic that you built this parts of this ecosystem that are not really utilized by the majority of the community you're building for by decree, by religious preference, I guess. So essentially what we've now arrived at is we're building an entire online ecosystem. And that includes a layer 1 blockchain, a DEX, decentralized exchange, because our own token, our own creator community social platform, our own decentralized food and distribution platform, and all of these are integrated. We also are building our own DAO, our own NFTs as well. And part of the idea where some of these connections I think will come from today is our intention in supporting, if you like, this is the proof of concept for what can be replicated, is how we might be able to utilize NFTs and fractional ownership. So our marketplace will be a Web 3.0 marketplace that will enable NFT, and it's an NFT marketplace as well, to be sold. And you can store that we're creating our own wallet as well. And when I'm saying we're creating, most of what I'm talking about has already been created. We're like 60 to 70% through creating everything that I'm sharing with you. It's not something we're just starting. We're kind of old school in the way we're approaching it. We're building it first and then launching with a finished, test net product. So the distribution platform is already built. The marketplace is already built. The token's already built. We have to build the layer 1 blockchain. We have to build the DEX. I know the DEX is already built. We have to build the Explorer, the blockchain Explorer. There's like a few little bits that we think can get built in the next 4 to 6 months. So, because my vision is, okay, you can, whatever it is that your specific gift is in what you're creating, can then be contributive to the community. And then, if we choose to expand, because, either this community or others, that's when the community will have a significant amount of resources that can be distributed. And if the community through the DAO decides that they want to invest that into building another project because they want to live in a different part of the world instead of Mexico, then we can create the same thing. And the beauty is that there'll be a hub of all these different communities networked. And some of this, maybe I guess it's all public now. Some of this maybe, I guess, I don't know where, we can't, once it's been shared, right?
Yeah, it's going live.
It's going live now. So, hey, this is what we're doing. I didn't really think about being on YouTube, but anyway. Because we're ultimately thinking about how do we create it for permanence? Because that was a big part of what we're creating. So having our own peer-to-peer communication systems. So that, yeah.
Well, I have a question with that because, it's kind of like decentralized exchanges, right? Like, you put it out there and we talk about wallets and all these layer ones about the word Andrew said, interoperability. Mm-hmm. So even though we all building these sustainable communities and then we want to expand into having like our partners already bought land in Portugal. Mm-hmm. So for us, we're going to have in Tulum in Portugal and then you can do it from there. But then because that's with us. But in the end, you want to be able to connect to either other communities or other DAOs that are not in your DAO. So like interoperability, just not of layer ones and but just or like NFTs. Right now there's NFTs on Ethereum and Solana, and FTX, which it was mentioned by Andrew too, is working on that interoperability. You can sell both NFTs from Solana and from Ethereum, which is two different layer ones on the same marketplace. So I mean, it all comes down to interoperability.
Sure.
So even though it's based on the same network, I mean, it can. I think in the future, once we do have these hubs set up, even you're gonna be able to even go to a hub from another hub layer, I guess you can call it, because these are layer one hubs. And the other question that I had is, because you said you're working on stuff that's 60-70% made. So when is the DAO's gonna start doing decisions? Because right now it looks like the team is doing decisions.
Exactly.
And when is the DAO's gonna be doing that? Is it after the NFTs? And what layer are you gonna have the DAO making decisions on? Like what? I guess blockchain.
Right.
You're gonna wait till the private one, or you're gonna start doing these decisions of with private blockchain to do even before you create it?
So, I mean, interesting questions. Our first priority is honestly, we're just building the pieces and we're integrating them together. As far as the DAO, I think there'll be successive, because I think that actually how you structure the governance of a DAO is really, really critical to its longevity.
Yeah, that was my basic question.
Right. And so that hasn't been determined yet.
Okay.
So so for what, but I can tell you we're building it to be able to step away from it.
Yeah.
Okay. That's and the same goes with the Mother Tree lands.
Oh, autonomous.
Yeah, exactly.
You're
Same-
really a DAO, not a dope.
Right. The same goes with the Mother Tree lands. I don't have an attachment to needing the moment, theoretically I own the majority of the communal areas.
Mhm.
I don't have any attachment to owning communal areas at all.
Yeah,
I'm more than
but-
happy for the community to buy out that land
Exactly.
and then utilize that wealth to start the next project.
Well, my question for when, as part of the timeline, when because when DAOs start making the decisions and you start recording those votes, you can start like building that history, kind of like credit history.
Mhm.
Like when you get, like you're not gonna have great credit history, but you need to start like with that credit and like get something in the mall and then pay back real quick so you can start that. So that's what I was wondering, like when's the DAO
It's going to
decision?
come after we have the community on the land and things like that. So
Okay.
it's gonna take some time before we get. And there's also, we have a let's call it a community contributor ranking system.
Yes, that.
All right. That's already being programmed in.
Okay.
That's programmed into create economy. That's programmed into every aspect.
So you can know which, like who's providing value.
Totally. That's being specified and built in.
Got it.
And that'll be part. So essentially, we're having a Genesis round, then we're having a pre-sale round, then we're having a public.
Got it.
And the Genesis is private individuals whitelisted that have skill sets and knowledge that would help us to actually build. So we're still looking for a CTO, even though we're doing all the development ourselves and we're very experienced in business and successful in business. It's more about now also bringing in knowledge and interactions with people that have already got connections with other exchanges to give us distribution, if you like,
Yes.
for what we're creating.
Or other DAOs.
Yes,
So-
and we've built interoperability into every single aspect of what we're doing through our decks. But we have our own native token, which all transactions will take place in, and everything is philanthropic. So a percentage of every transaction, if you like a gas fee, is going to a philanthropic DAO-based allocation, of which will have specific. We'll be feeding specific projects into that system that will also be part of the NFT projects that we're developing and creating.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, so as we can see from our experience as RegenTribe and having taken the mission of finding regenerative communities, sharing their stories to let people know that A, they exist, B, how amazing they are for us as individuals, and C, how amazing they are for the environment in general. Nathan's project, Mother Tree, is one of the premier communities that we've observed in development near Tulum. And it's obvious by his presentation how integrated digital technologies are going to be in the project, which really exemplifies the movement to the digital world, which again iterates how important it is that we build this bridge, A, that we each understand how to use these technologies, and B, observe how these bridges are being built. where Nathan will be creating value for the community from these digital tools. And that is a big portion of our initiative of our project, to find these projects, showcase them, and showcase these technologies to the world on how they're going to be integrated in their communities. Okay, Nathan, do you want a closing statement? Cassandra's going to present after, and then we're going to have kind of an open table discussion, specifically about master plans, experiences that they're having, making their master plans, executing their master plans. Cassandra's phase is a bit earlier, where she is now putting together and completing her master plan. So,
the only thing I was going to say is that our community and our circular economy that we're building is very much consent-based.
Right.
So you don't have to participate in our DAO. You don't have to participate in a contribution of the revenue you might be earning within the ecosystem towards your community. It's not obligatory, but it's a two-way interaction. If you do choose to contribute, then you also access the resources that are created by that ecosystem.
Choose your level of involvement.
Yeah, choose your level. We're very selective about the people who we're recruiting as our neighbors. Highly selective. I've said no to like 4, and that's not I wanting to say no. It's because we're largely going to be a self-governing community. It's not an autocratic system. It's not me telling people how they choose to live. I'm not interested in doing that at all. But that takes a certain type of person that can be self-governing. And obviously we're passionate about attracting people that have similar values and beliefs, but also a diversity that is complementary to each other. So, I just want to, finish by saying, thank you so much for listening. And if you have an interest or desire to come and check out Mother Tree, then please reach out to me.
We're doing a once a month kind of a
gathering.
We'll be sharing information about this and the information about the project in general through our resource channel in the Discord. If you guys aren't in the Discord, please join. We'll talk about that soon.
So thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, pass on up. Okay, in the transition, so Nathan shared amazing things about his initiative and his project. Nathan, when did you start with the idea for Mother Tree?
We arrived in Mexico, a bit over January, basically last year.
Right.
So it's been a little bit over a year in development.
Right. When did you break ground on the land?
That was after that. Like we actually purchased the land December before, right? So a year and a half, and then we started.
Right, and in our experience of what we observed with Nathan, he's moving at lightning speed compared to a lot of the other projects in Mexico specifically. There's a learning gap, let's call it, to learning how to integrate with local teams and local service providers that Nathan has really found awesome service providers that are building and doing a lot of it with crypto, which is pretty amazing. So awesome project. You guys will know more about it. We'll share more. Next presentation is Cassandra. She has a lot of experience in community, has lived in communities. This is her beautiful dog, Eggshell. And she'll be sharing Tierras Nativas and projects about that. So go ahead, Cassandra. welcome.
Hi. So this is on?
Yeah, yes. I'm gonna put it
on. Okay. Cool. Okay. Who here wants to build a community? Okay. Who here has land to build that community? Okay. Who here has lived in community before? Okay, cool. That just gives me a little bit of a gauge on what to communicate. Like Oscar shared, I have lived in community before. I lived in Costa Rica and Punta Mona, which was for me a huge privilege to step into that when I was 25 years old and have a really high functioning community space. The people who I lived with, we all really had shared values, which is a really important component to community living. Understanding what your values are is what's going to create that bond between everybody and keep everybody there and have that trajectory. And in that community living space, we just all showed up 100%, you know, like we knew how we were tethered together. And this is a really important component to community living are the social structures, right? It's not just the land. Like there's a very capitalist way of viewing this where it's like, build it and they shall come. And that's not true. It's not true. Okay, I visited other communities that want to be communities who have the infrastructure here in the Yucatan Peninsula and in other locations where they gave me the tour of the space and they have the buildings and they have the intention and they have a little bit of a healing center. And the guy kind of broke down crying to me and he was like, I don't know why people don't show up. Why isn't anybody here? But what I heard him say while he was giving me this tour is like, well, I built this and I built that. And this is what I did. And this is my idea. And I was like, well, that's a lot of I in trying to build a community, right? That doesn't really work. And so I took that as a really strong lesson. I even had like dreams about it. And it was just like really clear messages that to build community, the social structures, we need to do it together. And so this last year, I just moved to Mexico a year and a half ago, but the land that I'm working on is in Puerto Morelos. Is it showing yet? Okay.
You're showing over here in the main camera.
No, I mean the
Yeah,
presentation.
you're showing. I'm trying to get the presentation up.
Yeah. So the project, I kind of started this project when I was like 5 years ago, you know, envisioning it, thinking about what I want to do in this land. Oh. Okay. Thanks for being the IT guy. That's the wrong password. It's my only password. Okay. So now I've been living here for a year and a half and actually connecting with the land. Before I was like envisioning, doing the whole vision thing and trying to also convince my family that this was the right idea. You know, living in community, they're like, okay, they come from a very capitalist corporate world. And of course the pandemic hits and everybody's like, oh my God, community living is the best idea, right? So the idea is to steward this with integrity and not just make it, again, the same capitalist real estate development that has been done for many things, right? And the last year I've been really focusing on the master plan, as in like, what do I want to do on the land and also the social structures. So I'm going to share about that. Social structures and land development. A little background on me, like post living in the community in Punta Mona, I worked on a land development project in Ocochal, which is the Pacific side of Costa Rica, where I was very fortunate to work with somebody who has been doing this for 15 years. So I was kind of like getting my master's degree in land development, which was really fun. And I got paid to do it. So I felt like, woo, win. Is it showing? Okay, it's not showing. I want to share about this.
Yeah.
So what we did there is we really walked the land and connected with the land and the people who used to be the stewards of the land. This is like a really important component in building a master plan. What is the land telling you? What are the different curves that it has? Where's the water coming from? Where's the wind coming from? Because this is going to give you information. It's the intelligence that you're going to bring into the project. Right? Sometimes we come in and we're like, well, I want to build this and this is what I do. And then like real estate, they just like take out the whole forest and build what they want. And it's like, well, there's a whole intelligence there that actually if you flow with it, it's going to work much better with you. And it's going to, yeah, like we are limited in our mindset, right? So when you build with the land, it's kind of like permaculture, it's regenerative, it's part of the regenerative movement, this understanding that we're not the ones who are going to like do what we think we're going to do. An important component for those who do have land is really connect with the guides, the spirit guides of that land. I mean, the last project that I worked on in Costa Rica, we got blocked for like 2 months and it was just like, what's going on? Like our guys couldn't show up to work. There was like weird accidents and motorcycle accidents and then like sickness in the family. And so it's actually a responsibility. Like when you're stewarding, that you're protecting the people who are participating in your project as well. Connect with the elders, know what like offerings you have to do. Here in this area, we have the aluches, which are the little like small kids that take care of the forest that the Mayan elders created for protection. And so we make ofrendas to them. And that's like probably like the only thing I've done on the land, right? Like we have an altar. It's the only thing I have on the land right now. And
What do
just
you
walkways. So the ofrendas, you see them in a lot of places. They have like little casitas, little houses.
That's what it is.
So those are the houses for the aluches. And so usually you have like 7 jicaras, and you can do different ofrendas, which is like honey, tobacco, 1 rolled tobacco, 1 loose tobacco. I actually have a list. I was speaking with an elder from the Mayan communities between here and Coba, and he was showing me and teaching me about this. Flowers, the fruits that you like, right? Because you're creating a connection with them. So that's an important thing. Like, what do you like? What is important to you? And every country and every region has different. You know, in Costa Rica, we had spirit guides who just were blocking us, and we did different offerings. People put crystals in the ground, but ideally, because I have like Costa Rica is kind of my second home, and I just came from there. I just actually came from there yesterday. I have a really big connection with one of the abuelas there, who's a Baruca elder, and she was just sharing some really deep wisdom in a conference that we were at, Water Woman, and the elders want to pass down this information, you know, but we need to show up also with respect. It doesn't have to mean like, oh, like idolizing, you know, but like we want to learn, like that humble respect of like, can you show us your ways and learn what truly is of this land? Because every land is different. And just like sacred medicine is from different lands, there's different energies. So do not need to be seeing my WhatsApps. Okay. So this is just a little background on like the last project that I worked on, so you guys can see. Like when you're doing your land development, you can get your topography done. Is it showing correctly? Yeah. Okay. And that's going to start to inform you. I mean, here it's pretty flat in this area, like where we are in the Yucatan. But for example, this in Costa Rica, we had a lot of change in elevation, which also provided and informed us where we could plant forest, right? Agroforestry, where we could plant cacao, because cacao can't be like straight in the sun. It has to be in shade. So your topography is going to inform you. And of course, you're going to hire experts or collaborate. Hopefully it's partnership, which is what I'm trying to do. It's like, yes, hire, but at the same time, the people who I'm bringing onto the project are people who are really inspired by the regenerative movement. You know, I spoke with like 4 different architectural firms before I found one that I was like, yes, like we can work on something together because we have shared values, and their energy is going to permeate the energy of your project. So for me, that's just like how I roll. You know, it's really important, but I think that we're all those kind of intentional beings, and we're trying to weave a new future. So the more intention we can have, I think will suit us. It's like we need to slow down to go fast. It's kind of the idea, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what like indigenous tribes were like, you know, like we can't just fix everything like, hey, like let's go and do this. Is this still very the old paradigm? Let's slow down, let's connect, let's build community. And so that's kind of what I'm working on too, is who are people who want to live in community, and let's start building circles, kind of like how Nathan wants to do on his land. I mean, I think that's the best way to do it, connecting people to the land, to the values, and seeing what comes out of that. I want to go. Okay, so sectors, well, that's what I mentioned already, right? You're going to see the 4 seasons. How does the water run on your land? Where does it drain well? Where doesn't it drain? Where do you have elevation? Where you have elevation, you probably want to build. Where are the winds coming from? And here specifically, we have hurricanes, right? So you want to have like a really strong front towards where the hurricanes are coming and the winds, but you can also capture that wind energy. So all these different elements are telling us something. Where's the sun coming from? So, por ejemplo, I'm going to speak Spanglish sometimes. I'm sure you guys are cool.
Built like the old people built, like taking into consideration like the flow of the environment. Like
exactly.
Square, like here.
Well, they're as much part of the community than you are, because they're going to be there. So you might as well interact with them. Is that not flowing?
You want to share this?
And they had to do topography over like hundreds of years of like observation. Now you can do topography with an expert like that.
And so there's definitely some interesting things that you can do with that. Like connecting with your neighbors is a really important thing. Like who has been stewarding this land for a long time? They're going to know better than anything you can find on the internet. They're going to say, oh, in August, like the river just like floods over here and this and that's the information, which is part of the regenerative movement, is like creating that connection with the people around us. That creates resiliency, right? When you have an interconnected network like the mycelial network, or even just fruits and veggies, and they're intertwined, it's much healthier ecosystem. And so that's the same for our projects. Like your neighbors, I know my neighbors very well. We really like each other, and then we also don't like each other because there's a culture clash also. So it's kind of funny, like trying to weave and just having to be patient for me, especially being a woman in Mexico. Ooh, it's interesting. So here you guys can see the map. There's the Cancun airport, Puerto Morelos, little cute small beach town. And the property is about 15 kilometers in. It's actually 14 kilometers, but I'm choosing not to open another entrance from the main road just because there's already access to it and there's no need to like displace more forest. It also works for a security measure, just to not be directly off the main road. So when you look at going back to the elements, right? So the sun comes from the east to the west. So for part of the design, which I'll show in a little bit, you want to build going your houses or your buildings like north to south. That way, the sun is only hitting them at a very small amount of time, not the whole length, right? So if the house is like this and the sun's going over it, that is getting heated up. So what's smart architecture, smart design? Like if you put it this way, the sun hits it, it's still hitting at the same time technically, but it doesn't allow for that much heat to be like kept indoors. Okay, so let's see. Cool, this is fun.
This term is called passive thermal design, right? So designing houses in a way that as the sun rises from east to west, your main windows aren't taking in that forward-facing sun at the sunrise or at the sunset. We'll talk more about this in future workshops, like building, for example, where we design with the contours of the land. But in the master plan, you identify these things, the topography, the elements, so that you can design and build in the most regenerative way.
Yeah, in respect to what's already there. I mean, there's already things living there. So next you would go into like zoning design, right? So what are the zones? We know this maybe about permaculture. I don't know how many people know about permaculture, but zones is like, how do you create sections within your space so it has a flow? So what I did this past year, well, this is mostly all last year, was like walk the land. Like walk and observe and observe and observe. So all these points are points that I marked myself. Really big trees, holes in the ground that could be potential like cenote openings, tracks of animals. So we started with an X, and then we put in a T. So those were like the paths that I did. This is actually 100 hectares. And then through that, I just started like in my observation being like, okay, here we want to walk this way because I'm seeing like a couple of trees that are interesting. So I would cut paths intersecting those big crossways, and this is how you just start to walk a space because there's so much. Like, where do we start? So I was a little bit overwhelmed. I'm like, so much land. What do I do? And then through that, I started to, okay, so I'm going to share with you guys, right? Like the center point, which is right here. Can you see my mouse?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay, so the center point was super interesting when I arrived because there was these like massive trees in this like beautiful kind of like circular space. And so I decided to put the altar there for the aluches.
What number is it?
Huh?
What number is it?
Ooh, it might not show up in this, but it's just in here. It's like the center.
That's 4 right there.
Por ahí, sí. O sea, es el centro of the whole space.
Right, so that rectangle is your 66 or 100 hectares, right?
So that's where I invested the most energy thus far, right? I would like invest with the aluches. We did ceremony there. We like opened kind of that space. And so energetically. So considering that, that's one of the things that I'm considering when I'm building out my master plan. So I was like, how do I integrate this section as a really important component to the whole design that's going to come around? And so it took me a while, and eventually I walked other areas. So like you see on over here around 72, between 72 and 155, that area is just like really gorgeous, really big trees. I walked with my permaculturist, and he also builds tree houses, and we were like, wow, this would be a really cool place for tree houses. And so we opened it up and explored the possibilities and just like ideating and envisioning and listening to what it wants. And our access to the land is actually over here, right? So it's, can you guys see that well?
Yes.
From this red dot to this flag. And so I opened a road that's this road right here. So that's kind of like where you enter the property. So we're going to go to the next one so you can see kind of what I started to design around that. So that was the road that I opened up, which I walked myself, and I like put the flags, and the guy who was like clearing, you know, I was there with him the whole time, and I like rerouted him a couple of times. So it's not just like a straight road to the middle. It's this zigzag and holding sacred like the bigger trees, which are a habitat. And so that comes up to about here. And so I decided that the temple space is going to be right in the middle because that's the original temple. That's where we started everything. And then we'll go, let me just go into the next one because it's kind of hard to read this one. So this is right now my preliminary master plan that I designed, and I'm working now with a team of advisors and my architects to see like what can actually be done there, because you also have to consider what are the laws, right? What can you build there? This is ejido land. The other person who also co-owns the land with us is an ejidataria. So we don't really have to get per se so many permissions from the ejido, but we still need to follow the rules with Sermanat and Profepa. So we need to basically give them this master plan so that we can get permitting. We're in high conservation, which is great because we were going to do that anyways, but whatever. It's like nice to abide by the rules. So I can only build like 2 homes per hectare. I'm building less than that, but that is the, you know, when you're building your master plan, those are the things you want to look at. What are the laws? What is happening? The preliminary boundaries that you can build off of. Yes.
How many houses are you looking to build?
Okay, so I'm going to show right now. Okay, I have like 8 minutes. Okay, just brief overview. So I'm going to go from like the macro to the micro.
So Cassandra's doing an overview of the plan, her project, and then we're going to have a discussion between Nathan and Cassandra and open to questions as well. So.
Okay, so here you'll see there's the temple site, right? That's where we left off. We'll start there, the temple site. This to me was kind of the most important part to like develop and understand around it. So this is basically the holistic spiral. And this is my phase 1, which is going to be, it's not really hotel villas. Like the person who did this for me is like a real estate developer, but in the sense it's villas where we're going to do our phase 1, where people are going to come in. We're going to incubate the rest of the project. This is the community center, which will be like a community center and wellness center. So I really like this from permaculture, right? It's like stacking functions. How do we stack functions in the development that we're doing? So at first, this is going to be it's going to be the community center and the wellness center. And then once we expand enough, then we'll build a whole other wellness center. This is our community center, wellness center, venue space. And then as it actually grows and develops, then we can invest more money into a space. But we don't need to have a venue space at first and a wellness center because that's a huge overhead, right? So it's kind of like that slow and steady style. And that's how you want to do like your phases, also your business development. So wellness center, which is not now, but in the future, which will actually be further this way, co-working, because we all have to work apparently. Okay, so this whole area is agroforestry and kind of just keeping that corridor so we don't block off the animal movement. And it also creates, I loved what Nathan said about that too, right? Is like creating the space between so you don't have like people coming into the commercial area and then the residents being there and feeling like, okay, there's like strangers in my home. So you have those 2 spaces. So the residential area is up here. And so right now I have around 42 homes to answer your question that I'm designing for. This specific design is only on 66 hectares. It's not on the whole thing. So like you see here, right? it's only on the top half, if you can see the screen. It's not on the bottom. So the reason why I did that is to leave room for future, like the evolution of the project. I'm not like, this is everything it's going to be, because I want to bring in other partners into the project. So somebody has an amazing, I don't know, idea for that area, or we need to have more residency, tree houses, you know, things that I'm not the vision keeper of. Like, that's the whole point for me. Community is about partnerism and how we collaborate. Okay, so let me go quickly to this. Okay, so residential, and then the top spiral is the art spiral. So we'll have an art temple and some art residency there, right? The expression. And this spiral down below is, it's not going to be called the permaculture spiral, but that's what it's called right now.
I already got the name already.
Oh, okay. Well, we can vote on it. That's kind of the cool part about it. So the idea is to have, right, the gardens, to have a learning facility, to have workshops. Like, we're going to have wood workshops, you're going to have storage, and a resource management center. So that's kind of in between all the areas, the resource management center. So when you're developing your plan, it's like you have to think of the flow of how people are flowing in and out of these spaces. So the school is going to be over here because it's the closest to the road, right? So we want other people to join the school and not just who we're living with. I remember you. So nice to see you. Yeah, so one last thing, I have like 4 minutes, right, Oscar? So that's like the land aspect, right? And we have to think about flow within that land. So what is the flow? It's like the people, the community, the energy. We're driving energy through that whole space. So like I said, this year I've been working on the social structures, because we're the ones who are going to be managing or stewarding that whole area. So one of the things that I highly, highly, highly recommend is that you create a system for your social structures. It doesn't mean that it's going to be the system that's going to stay there forever, but it's going to adapt as people come in. But first of all, how do people become part of your community? What does being a community member mean? What does a member do? What are their responsibilities? How does somebody become an elder? You know, you can put it in whatever phrasing you want, but creating that flow of transition from one level to another level, not because of hierarchy, but it's, as you see, these are like, it's spheres of engagement. Like, how do people engage? Because not everybody is going to want to engage at the same level in your community. You know, it's just a matter of fact. Like, some people are going to be transient and more nomadic, and like, you have to also make that decision. Do you want people to be transient there, or do you want more like long-term stewards? And that's okay. It doesn't matter. It's just what you want. You're the vision keeper. And if you're not the vision keeper and you're going to a community, like, ask these questions. Right? Like, how do people come in and out of the community? Like a DAO. And I love that DAOs are like now here, you know, in these times, like the digital platforms are mirroring so much of what's so important in our physical world and what's been in communities for a long time. So the other one that I would have loved to talk about is the digital component, but that's not my background. So I'm really happy that Nathan did. So for me, this is kind of like a really rough draft of how I started it. So I was like, okay, like a newcomer comes in. So what does that mean? Who are they? You know, so it's like usually they'll probably be an attendee to a workshop or a retreat. So they'll probably come for like 2 weeks, and then maybe they really love it there. And they're like, hey, like, I want to come and live here. Like, can I live here? You know, and it's like, okay, well, it's not that easy. You know, community living requires, it's a whole culture of how you interact with people and how you're responsible for yourself and your deep personal work. Also, if you're living in a spiritual community, some people might just say work 10 hours in the garden a week, and that's good enough, and that's cool. And for my community specifically, or for this community, I should say, the goal is to have a very like deep personal work, because we need to evolve as human beings. And for me, living in community is the way that I've been able to have more mirrors in my life. But because I trust the people that I live with, I'm not negating what they're saying. We're creating trust in a safe space for us to grow and to develop.
You're embracing the mirror, not like physical mirrors.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Not dirty mirrors.
Yes. Yeah, because you trust what your fellow friends are telling you. You're like, you're doing that again, you know, like, remember that you wanted to like overcome this, and you're like, oh yeah. And you also see the impact of your actions, how much it affects everybody. And these are people that you love and care about. I mean, we love our families, but they trigger us, right? And they're like, we can kind of just deny what they're saying because they're annoying and they're not right and they don't know. But when you live in community, you're choosing the people who you live with. And so for me, it's a really important like active component to create that trust through the values. And that creates that evolutionary process that we need, in my opinion. So I'll just share quickly. Oh, it's very.
So in future workshops, closer to the end, we'll be sharing one day on the human element. Things to consider to help the humans on the community live. And although a big focus on community creation is in finding the land, building, planning, the most important element of any community is the human element. How do we live together? How do we decide together?
Yeah.
How do we do things together? Tons of projects get through the first phases and build epic spaces and never make it as a community. They end up just becoming resorts or retreat centers because people never figure out how to co-live. So we'll have specific days on both ecosystem of the community and the human element in future weeks.
Just to say something off of that will tie into like how I introduced myself, right? So I lived in that awesome community that I shared about. And then a year and a half later, I ended up living at another community. And it was so dysfunctional and it was so damaging for everybody because nobody really had these structures. Nobody knew their role and their place. And, you know, going back to like the indigenous way, when you're born into a tribe, they know and you know what you are here to do, and it is honored and respected. And we're in a really hard time because we're transitioning back to that, right? So that we need to like deprogram ourselves, to reprogram ourselves, and create that safety with each other because maybe we didn't have it growing up, most likely. And so in that community, it was like we were traumatizing more people than we were actually like helping because nobody knew how to have conflict resolution. You know, we didn't know how to do nonviolent communication, which are really important components. And so just lastly, this is kind of what I created. And it's still in transition. It's ever evolving. Like one of my pillars is adaptation. So it's always going to change. And hopefully everything that I've built is like not even necessary at all in the future. And our kids are going to laugh at us like, you guys didn't know about conflict resolution? Why did that have to be a pillar? So like a newcomer, then an attendee, then somebody who attends and wants to like live in the community, they go through a community trial phase, which is like 3 months to 6 months, and they live on the land, right? So they connect with the land and they say, okay, yeah, I want to build here. Then you build your home. If you go through like, you know, the elders and the rest of the community sees that you're actually living within the same values. And then post that is like collaborator and co-creator and elder. So by stewarding the land longer, you're going to have access to more things, which means that you could potentially partner up and have your own business on the land. You know, if the business that you're trying to have there is in alignment with how you treat people, how you treat the planet, how you treat yourself, your family, these things are important. Because we do want to create like an economy on there, and it doesn't have to be difficult. I think that was it. So cool. 3 of 3. I mean, there's more, but there are a lot more.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you, Sandra. All right, so I'm gonna pull up these chairs for you guys, and I would love for you guys to have a seat. And I will lead a few questions from the group and some questions that, again, in our journey as RegenTribe, we found an eco hotel. We were given the opportunity to turn it into a regenerative community. And in that journey, we learned and practiced a bunch of things. We are now connecting with amazing projects like these and others here in Quintana Roo and around the world, and identifying these sensitive spots, hot spots in the process for people to create these amazing spaces. And questions arise, you know, certain topics. I'm a systematic person and I like to have a checklist of things that I go through, and this is how I figure out my process. So for you guys, anything to share with each other? Anything that you heard in each other's presentations? Like, oh, I remember this phase, or oh, you're at this phase. What did you do around this? Anything like this, you guys? Any?
I want to acknowledge some things in that presentation that was, I think, are cool. Before we did anything to the land, we had the Hilo come out and honor and bless the land, create a shrine, make an offering. Then, before we did any construction, we did the same thing again. And I think if you're working with the Hitos and you're working directly with the Hito, I think it's really important to see yourself as part of the Hito. Just like not that you're buying a land and you're separate from the ejido, but you're actually part of the ejido. So your intent is to bring well-being to the ejido that you're part of if you're doing interaction. Our intention is to provide medical, veterinary services, educational services as an extension to our neighbours. And depending on the legal structures, I think it's really important to really understand well the ejido law, but also understand the responsibility that you have if you're actually going to title land, what that actually truly means. To title land basically means you're taking that ownership from the ejido, and then it's forever no longer going to be native land. It becomes privatized land, and that's a big decision about whether you need to do that, or want to do that. I think it's so certain questions when we're engaging with people who invest in Mother Tree, and I made this comment that I own land. I actually don't own land. Just to make a qualification, I have the rights to the land.
So you're both on ejido land.
Yeah. And it's to at least to be respectful of the land, the spirits of the land, and if you like, I'm from Australia, and so we would honour the traditional custodians. I think if you really understand that you're, I like the way you use steward, that you don't actually ever really own anything. You're a steward of what you're participating in the creation of. Then I think you treat very differently. The lens you look through is very different from something you want to exploit, to sell, to make profit, versus something you actually want to create well-being. So and I loved also the creation of the Fibonacci spirals, and we were in a similar mindset. So there must be a collective field that's going on there. And I like your dog too. It's like wanting to hang out. Yeah.
My high executive assistant.
Yeah, interesting that you guys both are working with the same spiral techniques, which I was excited to kind of pinpoint. Yeah.
Well,
One last thing is I want to speak just towards the land. I did the same thing. The first thing I did is walk the land. And what was interesting, I had a shopping list of, if I was to create the ideal reality I want to live in, this would brought me on it. And when we went to create the master plan, I was working with somebody that had just come out of a 21-day water fast. And I'd been reaching out to like 5 different architectural designers, and no one was getting back to me. It was nothing. All of a sudden, she said, "Oh, I felt an impulse after doing a ceremony that I need to work with you on this project." And so the first thing we created was the master plan. And she said, "I've never had anything that's just flown out onto a page before of any project I've ever worked on." And what was crazy, and this is when tingles again, what was crazy is that I'd placed where I felt things would be just in an energy, feeling sense. And when I walked the land, it was literally, you've walked the land a number of times. It's like exactly where I had placed it within 10 meters, 20 meters was where the structures ended up being, in an uncanny way. Like it was already this is the way things are meant to be. So I think the difference is if you're approaching it from mental, logical level, then I think you're out of tune with what the land's communicating with you. If you're able to go out there and sit and be quiet on the land for a while, allow yourself to come into coherence with the messages of the land, then that'll be an automatic process, and it'll be really, really simple.
So this is a beautiful example of this regenerative direction that we all hope things go in, where on the opposite side, traditional land developers look at a map and they pretty much get to the land and gut everything flat and throw a piece of concrete down and build, right? This, in contrast, you come in and you feel the land. And this is why the master plan is critical. It's critical to identify the topography. Where are their high points? Where are their low points? Because we're not just going to crush everything and throw a slab of concrete down.
It'll also cost more.
Right. Yeah, right. It'll also cost more. And there's processes, pros and cons for everything. But this is the path that we're going to both protect nature and do things in a more channeled way, I would say.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love what you said about that, because the regenerative movement is really about regenerating ourselves first so we can live in a regenerative space and create that abundance. And by tapping out of our head and into our heart and being more like artistic, right? Which we're barely given the opportunity to do that in the way that we are raised. I mean, some people go and they're like the rebels who are the artists, but why are they rebels? It's like we're all artists. And I think that's just so important because I definitely built other master plans for this project, and it was so from the head space, and it just did not flow at all, you know. And you're not going to get it on the first try or the second try, but if you take the steps to regenerate yourself and heal yourself, it's just going to come in such a more natural way, right? Like, I'm sure when you were trying to get the other architecture, like, why don't they call me back? And like, what's going on with Mexico? Like, why doesn't anybody want to work here? I mean, I know that stuff goes through my head, and it's not that. It's just the messages that are coming to you. It's like, it's not this person, you know, or like, are you checking in with yourself? So yeah, definitely self-regeneration is going to allow a much better flow when you're working with so many literally spirits and elements and people. You got to show up as your true self and not as who we think we should be. So I definitely agree with you on that.
Okay, so topics of master plan. Does anyone have any questions to start? Has anyone planned a? Oh, go ahead, please.
About the ejido, the relationship you establish with the ejido. We're talking about big projects, probably with many investors. So probably investors would like some guarantee on their investment somehow. What kind of relationship you establish with the ejido and yourself for future stability? You know?
Yeah. So there's different ways of going about it. I mean, I think we're in different situations because like I said, the other person who owns the land with us, she's an ejidataria. So it's like our name is under the title per se of the land, but it still doesn't mean that it's private. Like we can't chunk it off and sell it. We have the option to if we want to privatize. So an option that what I'm working on is creating either more like a cooperative or a land trust, where people are shareholders or have fractal ownership of the businesses that are on the land. And for example, if somebody's gonna build their home, it's just called como what is this term?
Vencideros.
No vencidos, porque eso todavía se lo estás pasando a ellos. It's like you have access to build on the land. So like you would be your usufructo. Yeah, you would have the like the home that you build is your home, but the land is not. So if you want to leave the community, you can sell your home, and that's your value and your asset, right? So I'm still trying to build that bridge within the old world paradigm and the new world, where in the future it might not be like that, but right now we need to build a bridge to be able to get there. So I think those are different ways of being able to say like you can have a business and people have the business on the land per se, and you have to have backing by the bank that it's actually a land trust, and then therefore there's more security for investors if that's what you're looking for. That's my experience. So.
My approach was first to establish trust for myself. So I did research in the ejido. I went and spoke to people that were living there, had lived there for a long time. So my version of establishing trust is to demonstrate first that I'm willing to make that risk myself. And so the way I did it was I went and visited numerous people. I was renting in that ejido first. I just wanted to live inside the ejido first. So I rented land there first. And we spoke to the landlord who had been there for like something like 18 years and who had multiple plots inside that ejido and also in other ejidos. Because we'd heard like everyone who does research on the internet, it's the worst thing that's ever going to happen. They're going to take your money and all that sort of stuff. And that's
it's one reality.
It's one reality, and it's
if you don't do what you did.
Right, and it's a fear response that I still had a bit of a gulp in my throat the first time I sent a significant amount of money to buy the land the first time from having sold my company in Australia. So, and I think the next thing is to have done your research. So I went to multiple lawyers and I had that checked and double checked and triple checked to make sure the documentation I had. So now I've got one perspective, and the ejido we're in is Francisco Maya, and every 100% of the people that I engage with that are independent of each other all gave just resounding, emphatic, positive response. And my direct personal intuition and trust of that, the way the land had come to us, was part of it. So the short answer is I tell my story of convincing myself that it was a good decision. All right? And then I relay it, and because I went through the same emotions, So I'm empathetic to that. And so that in that moment, do I really know these people? What's interesting now, and are you, let's come back to yourself. Are you a trustworthy person? Because if you're not really trusting in yourself, then that's going to come through in communication regardless. So the majority of people who've bought land at Mother Tree have never been to Mother Tree. The majority. And that's pretty, I think that's pretty potent and powerful, that people are entrusting to send their money from moving from Spain, from Canada, from Australia, sight unseen, never been to land. And I think part of that is how do you convey the story of what you're creating, and how do you represent yourself? So we're not coming from a neediness place. We're not coming from, you know, and I think when you convey the master plan and the intentionality that's gone through every single, you know, immaculate detail, it shows you've done, there's been preparation. And I think if people can feel if you're wanting to commercially achieve something, all versus they're going to be your neighbors. So you want to be doing the right thing by them from the outset. It's going to create a lot of problems and challenges in the future, as opposed to residential development, where often the developer doesn't live on the land, it doesn't live in the community. So my short answer is develop your own set of truths. Ask enough questions and do enough research where you feel satisfied that you feel you trust. Because at the end of the day, trusting contracts, we need to trust the people. You know, unless you deeply trust the Hido that you're engaging with, and there's no elements of doubt, then maybe it's not the right option, maybe something else. But also, I think what we referred to before, you're coming from a state of mind, like a mental perspective, or you're actually coming from a spirit-led feeling perspective. And the butterflies were really sold us, straight up. Like, you're telling me.
Just to build on top of this question.
Yeah, please. It's an important question. I have a point to make as well.
Can you explain to me how did you sell parts of your land if it's not private?
We're not selling the land. We're selling the rights to use the land, and we've got our particular instrument that basically has a direct relationship. We pay it. So basically, we've obtained the rights to use the land for the whole parcel, and now what we're doing is we're now transferring those rights, but then they have a direct relationship with the Hido, not through us. So
Can you say that again, louder, please?
We're essentially at first we're ascribing the rights, so that we have that particular land. We're assigning those rights to someone else, but then we forego, and then they enter a new rights assignment, pay another additional piece of money in the same way that we've got our block. So there's like a transference that we no longer have claim, and then that particular person that's buying that block, the rights to use the land, is then direct with the Hido. Because that was one of the things we discovered initially was through us. And if we die, if we, all these things you don't think about, like the festival, it's going to be like, oh, we'll put it in our wills, or wouldn't it be much simpler if we just had a direct relationship between the Hido and that person, and then they become.
There's like 40 people in your will.
Yeah.
It's like nothing.
Yeah, it just was going to be too complicated and wasn't going to work. And it was like, oh, that took the weight off me for feeling that I'm somehow responsible to hold that person's note. They're under the same risk as what I am, and it's not through me. And then I'm out of the equation if they want to transfer that plot. They'll still sign the agreements of the community, the bylaws, if you like, about how they're going to function, operate, build, lots of stuff. But yeah, that would be so.
I'd like to add something, not specific to this, but something you shared before about investors. So, like I said, we have different components to how we are connected to the Ejido, but if you can, like I'm looking at potentially privatizing small components to the whole project, which would be like where the businesses are set to kind of be able to have that. So where it's like, how do we support the ability for communities to be able to just pop up and really be functional and sustainable, financially sustainable, right? So that's one of the concepts that I'm playing with. I'm not 100% sure that I'm going to do that because I don't like land ownership, but I understand it can't be everything that I like, and we're playing the game with the legal system and the investors and the partners. So that's a potential as well.
That's an option to mitigate risk for investors on business.
Yeah. If you can do it.
One question.
Well, I just couldn't hear so clearly, like how you did your translate. Like you said that the people that have access to the land have a direct contract or deal with the Hido, and not through you. I didn't get that whole structure.
None of our land's under RAN. None of our land's under the title.
Okay.
It's all Hido.
It's still a Hido. Okay.
All Hido.
Oh, okay. I get it.
Right. And all we've done is instead of us having the right to use, we contractually assign that right to someone else. But then the ejido had to then recognize that and enter in a direct agreement with those. Okay, so we'll secure the land, and we're like we still have an agreement with them that they get rights to use to all the amenities. So we're charging a premium than what the ejido would charge for that specific land, significant premium. But we're making everything secure. We're basically making it an easy path to be inside the land. We're providing all the architectural drawings. We provide all the roads access, water access, power, everything.
But then each person that wants to actually have that access to, like you said, one directly with that ejido, and you just
ties in with what she just said, only for the specific residential plots, not for the whole community area, which is going to stay ejido land, unless we decide to do something 60 years from now.
Got it.
All right. So the vast 2/3 of the land would be ejido land regardless, and that's all the communal areas. And then at some stage, it's just going to happen in the world. We choose to migrate. The ejidos might have it. Who knows? My point being is we have a high degree of flexibility for that, and for the people, you got to really question. I think it comes down to the type of people investing. What is the need to control and possess? I mean, you have 60 years to think about that. Do you really need? So our intention is is to go as a collective to make that decision sometime in the future. But we've got no intention of privatizing land. I certainly don't. Certainly not until all construction is done, and then really make a decision of why would you need to. Are you planning to sell? In our environment, we have a fixed price, if you like, of what you're going to buy the land at anyway. So now I've had it one price. It's now a different price a year later. You're guaranteed to have that because that's what I'm selling the land at. And then that can be the exchange of that land. If you value add, then because we already know what was invested in the land because we're directing the builder, we have the architectural plans, we know what investments we made in the land, and we can make a fair evaluation. And the other thing is, we're helping. We've already had one person buy a land and it had to change a lot of circumstance, and then resell it. And so we facilitated that. So all that sort of still can happen.
I think the really cool thing about this, which it sounds like is your experience, which I'm experiencing, is that at first I was afraid to tell people that they weren't going to own the land. And I was like, how am I going to say this to people? Like, how do I sell this, And as it was just a really natural topic, it came out organically. And I think a lot of people are already in that mindset, It's been so surprising. People are like, I don't want to own land. That seems weird.
Yeah,
I just want to be on the land, and I want to have my home. And so it's really beautiful to see that actually our consciousness is going to that way. And I value that about this, our generation really moving into that space where land ownership just doesn't vibe with us.
What you possesses you. So I think it's more about how you're a steward, and can you invest in the environment and reap the benefits from that investment. So I think there's another aspect or angle to it, and it's about jurisdiction.
Yeah, I see it as a relation. When you own it, well, you own it, right? I mean, it's yours. Not like when you own a wife, you own it. But then when you steward it, it's like you have a girlfriend, you have a relationship, and you have to nurture her. If not, she's gonna go somewhere else. So that's how I see it.
So one way to consider it in a lot of conversations I've had, for example, last week, how we had a conversation with realtors that have been working with ejidos in the area for a long time. But entering ejido land is entering an existing community. And essentially what you're purchasing is a membership card to be able to use certain parts.
Just before that, I would like to
like John Luke is last year. He's the best conversation.
And then after you talk about this, have you ever thought or had the plan to become ejidatario or to buy an ejidatario right? Because the way normally, when somebody comes to the ejido already existed, probably what you've done is you bought a right of use of one beneficiary that sold the land.
Correct.
So this guy is still beneficiary. So he still owns a vote on on the future of the ejido. Is in 30 years, the ejido, the assembly still exists, the beneficiaries still exist, they vote, and of course they can vote some things that will definitely alter what's going on in the ejido. And have you ever think of that? Because now we're working on this because some ejidos there start moving like fast. I just take the example of Dos Ojos, and even now with the Maya trend, so it's like it's
I think
exploring. So at one point, ejido is pushing to disappear. That would happen in all of them. And by trying to embrace the community positivity of an ejido, I think at one point it would be interesting to explore that you would find beneficiaries from the beginning that want to retire, and you can actually buy their position, and for sure at the minimum be able to come at every assemblea and know what's going on, know everything, have some rights to connect with the Reforma Agraria, with the government agency that handle the ejido. That would be a strong point of secure everything what you do. And it's not easy, but have you thought of that?
Yeah, I've looked at that, and it's something that I probably need a bit clarification on. I'm not Mexican as a citizen, and it's my assumption, but maybe you can tell me otherwise, that you have to be Mexican to be a member of the ejido. Yeah, so we looked at that.
Become Mexican.
No,
it's not so hard.
No. That's definitely part of it. And obtaining residency here and everything like that. And maybe there'll be little niños and niñas somewhere in my trajectory that will make that more possible. But it actually came up to be about sometimes you can buy land in an ejido with the vote, or with that participation. At least someone presented me with another plot inside the same ejido. They said, we're also offering you with that, what you're referring to right now.
Yeah, they probably offer you like a representation, like a fourth.
Yeah,
thing,
and then you
would give a lot and give a lot of security, but still.
Right, and then you could also obtain a percentage of the income when they sell land within that specific area. To my understanding, you could also get a percentage of a royalty, if you like, of that environment as well. I don't know the full functionality. I only read the document once, but I was like, oh, that's interesting. But it definitely brought up the topic you're talking about. I think that would be super cool to have.
Yeah,
once I become Mexican.
Because that would be definitely important, because some ejidos, they still have a lot of common lands.
Yeah.
And if you have some rights, you have at least a little rights on the common land, which make you a capability to vote. And some ejidos actually accept a community instead of because now in ejidos, after the second generation, you have a family, and a family is a community. You have many people, okay? And if you register this community in Mexico, you can make a civil association, a family civil association, which is the members of the family. And the association, if you register in Mexico, is Mexico. That allows some ejidos to this way have they accept an association. Whatever the members are not Mexican, but the association is Mexican and registered by Mexico.
That's super cool.
That's really
that we should work together
for
to
sure. Because I think
something about that, yeah.
Something that I have a desire, and this links back to the NFT space, is to consciously create community in support, like serving regenerative communities that serve the mines as well. So I think there's a lot of expats and people with a lot of worldly experience who can bring a lot of just learning and in cohesion with the traditional mine ways, but also with the awareness of how to create infrastructures that can really support their well-being. So I think if we don't do that consciously, then there's going to be default where the developers do that, and where the ejido will be selling land and losing their influence over that. to people and corporations that might have different, less compliant agendas.
Yeah, totally. And so, beautiful moment here. This person, this strategy you're highlighting is something John Luke's been doing for years here in the region. And a reminder of what the purpose of this day is for different minds with different strategies and perspectives and skill sets coming together for this common goal, which is regeneration, creating a positive net impact for ourselves, the environment, and the people around us. So very, very cool option. Right, more questions? Yeah.
Question for you.
And cross.
If these ejidos accept, they accept associations,
Yes.
would it possible to go with a company there? Because that would be the perfect link. DAO, DAO company, and we work together.
Yeah, it basically depends. What I thought is that every ejido, some of them, sometime an ejido is, for example, for Playa del Carmen, when I was there, when there is one street, and of course, everything was ejido. Now it's 300,000 people living there. So when they started to deal with the ejido to grow the city, that went from 300 to 300,000 people within 11 years. That was fastest growth because it was basculated into like urbano, zona urbana. So suddenly the ejido became the equivalent of a development agency that we know in every country when you develop a urban thing. And then the ejidos are very powerful inside because they can make their decisions about what they do. So if X% of the beneficiaries say, okay, we decide now to accept this, that, then they could accept company. Because a company, same thing, of course, a Mexican company.
Exactly.
Yes,
The
but
idea
it
is
depends on the ejido. They can stay because they make their votes and they decide. Sometimes there is discrepancy because, for example, the municipio say here, you don't have the right to build this, that, this is the zoning, foresta. Now, when the ejido is here, it's still ejido very close to here, like 1 kilometer from here. If a guy decides to build a house, for example, if he decides to build a house, then the ejido starts. I mean, there could be conflict, but the conflict wouldn't go to the normal court. It will go to the ley agraria. So it's other courts and other law. I mean, the law is you have to have like specific. It's completely different, and it's another. And then it's another dimension. Then when you add the Maya sovereignty, wow, now it's complicated and when the ejido started to give, to give, for example, a road in the middle to the municipio, so sometimes we say this ejido has been municipalized something, so the Mayan lose their rights to be Mayan, to be indigenous. This is really
big with the Mayan.
This is complex, and this is a problem because now, for example, for the Tran Maya, the Maya they go for their sovereignty because that was the fastest way. Because actually, 3 pieces were completely blocked by judge recently last week in Yucatan, and it was on the sovereignty of the Maya people because they didn't consult. They won against Pablo, against the president, because they did not consult the Mayan people. But these guys, they were living there, and there is no municipio. But here, they try to do the same. But the government said, you're not really Maya anymore, because you are Maya, but the land is not Maya. You are not on your land, because your land has been you cannot have
Privatized.
I don't know
You cannot
the
verify
money.
rights.
You want to get everything. You want to say yes,
wanna
it's my ancestral land, and at the same time, when we give you land as the government, boom, you sell it, you destroy it, which is kind of real.
This
So-
is an important point. Like every single ejido is different.
Exactly.
So get to know your ejido.
Exactly.
They're different. Some are like, yes, let's do development. Some are like, no, colonizers have come in here. Some people just want to sell and only do real estate so they can get cash and they're just like money hungry. Like they're all different. So connect with them directly because there's no one overarching. I mean, there's certain rules per se, but they can still make their like bylaws per se within their own ejido that changes how that whole law.
And in order to do that, in order to get to know the ejido, just go to the RAN, start at the decree from the president of Mexico when he created the ejido, get the names of the founders of the ejido, and then follow any land you're gonna buy. Go to origin of property from the birth of the ejido. That's the best way. And the guys are still there. I mean, the ejido here, they're not very old. It's very important because that's the way then some, to avoid like one day somebody comes and it's my land. It happens a lot.
You definitely want to get an idea of this, the culture of the ejido and the trustworthiness. And I think it's really important.
Yeah.
And get to know them as people,
But it's great. I mean, it's great experience when you do something in a collective. I mean, to work in an ejido land gives you the big lesson about what is a community. And now you will automatically, when you work on an ejido, immediately comes the fact that you feel that you will have to integrate. It's the inclusion of the people that live there for a long time. If you are not in an ejido, you act as I come, I buy a piece of land,
Colonizer.
and you don't have in your brain the inclusion of the people here because they are not in the ejido, they are private, but they're still there, and you ignore that because you bought private property, and you take as granted that because you have the money to buy your property, you can ignore what's going on.
I think Nathan really touched on that, right? Like
Yeah.
thinking about the schools and how we can really affect our community, and that beyond boundaries is what creates resiliency at the end of the day. And like for us, it's like being connected as communities also is an important component. So it's like your community that's on the edges of your space, but also to other communities that are around the area who can support you, because we're all going to go through those trials and tribulations of like, how did this work for you? And like, let's not recreate the wheel every time. Let's support each other. We're not coming from a competitive mindset from the old paradigm. We really want to collaborate. And that's just going to move this forward so we can all learn. Like, I'm so excited to learn from Nathan about his platform with the NFTs. I'm not going to create my own platform. Like, we spoke about this when I was in Costa Rica. They're like, you can create your own platform. I was like, no, you're already doing it. Why am I going to be in this other space? Let's work on it together so we can conserve more land, so that we can have more funds to have ecological and cultural conservation and the evolution of that. What does that look like?
I want to bring it back. One other statement is when you're foreigner, you're coming into somebody else's land. It's like an unwritten kind of protocol of you need to build trust, you need to build acceptance by that ejido, because that guarantees your safety and security to a much higher extent. So in addition to having them out to the land and sitting and sharing meals with them and things like that, you can do gestures, So we've contributed to the roads and beyond what we needed to. And because the idea is that we're leading with a gift, if you like, we're leading with a, hey, we're in your community and we're wanting to be a part of this community. This is our offering, this is our gesture to you. Because ultimately, the ejido ultimately should know, will have kind of a grapevine communication with most people. And if it's a small ejido, they'll know a lot of people inside that environment. And they're going to be the people you're going to ask for if you need support or some security issue happens or things like that. Or if you need development of the roads, there has to be a nurtured relationship there.
So my encouragement is to see them not as someone who, not like a Western mindset of just, they've just sold the land to, hey, we're like John Luke was mentioning, we're actually joining their community. So how would you approach it if somebody came into the same rules we're creating in our community of coming in? It's kind of like, what's the reciprocal of honoring their traditions, their environment you're coming into?
By the way, the last thing about I was quite surprised. We started with the kids in the school, actually in the Hido. We built with people like a school, and it was quite easy to actually deal with the Secretaría de Educación. So we basically built the school and extra activity, and it was easy to, they came and it was an official school. It is an official school. They provide the teachers and everything, and they run the program, official program. And our idea was to add, because in Mexico you don't have any more school of Maya language, for example. So we were providing the Maya language and in a place, a kind of a camp for teaching the kids, all the trees, all, about the jungle in Maya, because they use the names, etc. But, we built that 15 years ago. We still have like 18 kids. And now during COVID, we had to close. I mean,
that's amazing.
You talk about trust. It's also, it's also not easy. But we have to do it. And of course, 15 years ago, it was different. It was different than now. Now things have changed a lot. Here too, because the head of the Ejido became governor of Tulum. So it was that was the first time that Maya was governor. He had very bad, honestly, for Maya. It's a good example. It was like, you work 15 years and you put in Maya, the ancestral, the guy became governor, he did the worst thing. But, we can understand, like, the revenge,
Yes.
all these white people, they destroyed us, no, and he was like, ruthless. But anyway, so.
Okay, yeah. All right, so, right, again, coming back to the topic of master plans today, I would like to go through kind of a down and dirty checklist with you guys. From your experience, right, with anyone here that is potentially considering creating a community, right? The first step is going through a list of, okay, if I'm going to do this, my first topic is to lay out my first master plan. What are some things that you feel, I've taken some notes and you guys have talked and shared, that you would consider are critical in considering when creating a master plan? Topography is a main one, right? We get to the land and we observe it and we understand what rock formations are there, where are the high points, where are the low points. From there, you guys, I added some things. Feel free to add or share anything. Identify the elements. What is the trajectory of the sun? Where is there water on the land? Is there a cenote somewhere? Some parts of Mexico, as we know, have underground rivers, most parts, all of the parts really. Some parts might have thinner land in between you and the water than other parts. So all things to consider, right? Sun, water, natural vegetation, you both shared as well. Where are the big trees? Where are just the low shrubs that is easier to build on, is easier to clear, is easier to do stuff on. You guys mentioned zones, right? Where are going to be the homes? Where are we going to grow our food? Where are we going to have our water treatment stations or our social spaces, right?
The commercial side, that's separate.
Commercial side, right? So this kind of branches off to something I found online, which is the necessary structures when city planning, right? This was an article for like major cities. And some of the things on there that I found to be really interesting were like a barber shop, an ice cream shop is one of the top 20 or 30 most important things to have in a community.
Oxo.
Right.
Oh my gosh.
A store where you sell things.
Talk to Oxo.
I talked to them to do Oxo coin.
Why are you using
Mine is you
for?
got to have the experiences in mind. Like for me,
With the steam project,
They're going to
I
the next
visualized
Yeah,
what
right.
life would be like if you see now you got the canvas,
Okay.
and it's like if you're carving a piece of wood, you let all that speak to you, but then it's like, okay, so you're making your spirit impression with the land and you're working with the land, but it's like when you're making that impression is for what purpose, for what experience, for what outcome.
Okay.
And so that governs then, like if you think of like what you drew up before, like the relationship journey that you're going to have with that experience of the land. So it's kind of like the pace of the land, how close are things, how is the flow and the movement of people, do they gain access to certain areas?
Right, the road, like how you roads, right? Roads is a major
Roads,
You can put
maps,
that on.
but it's kind of like it's more like
So like a flow map.
it's a flow map, and you're thinking about how are you going to interact with different spaces and what purpose do those places of convergence serve? You know.
Yeah.
I love that. I just want to do a note. In NFTs, actually, on Solana, the really common term that we're using now instead of MasterPlan is actually a roadmap.
Roadmap, okay.
So that's our master plan, but we just call it roadmap.
Right.
And that's a really trending term right now, even in younger generations. Like NFTs are trending right now on Google, and roadmap is also kind of trending because it's following that. So it's interesting because there's power in the words, you know. So I mean, roadmap.
Yeah, so coming from like, again, the tech space, the crypto space specifically, roadmap is definitely a word because it combines these two worlds of timelines, where we expect things to happen, and a master plan. What are the things that we expect on this timeline? And so this is kind of a way to look at a roadmap, I would say. Okay, so experiences from you guys. Anything else? Maybe like major components, right? As the first time, as the purpose of this workshop, that we will be building a master plan on this throughout the next few weeks, adding the components to the master plan, right? So topography, definitely. Identify the elements. What are our zones? Where are we going to grow our food, social spaces, housing, and sustainable systems, right?
So for your zones, like an important component is to stack functions, which is part of the experiences. Like you want to kind of and then you've already taken trees down. So by your roads, you can plant vegetation that could be edible because more sun is going to be hitting it. Right. So that's like stacking functions on like how do we really utilize this space to its maximum capacity that's good for the people and the planet, right? Because you're not going to just like monocrop there, obviously.
I was going to add to almost the same point, but in design, it's chunky. So, for instance, I've got an area of land that I've dedicated to agriculture, right? But then that agriculture is not just we have that, then that specific area has to be designed in the way you're talking about. And I wasn't an expert in agricultural design. I knew what I wanted. I knew what I had. I knew I didn't want a conventional level the forest and have lines. I wanted to have a food forest feel. And so we engaged the services of a group called Collective Awaybill, who were regenerative agricultural specialists that then walked the land, walked the paths that we'd already put in, and with the GPS, and then literally we've mapped the entire area. We know where all the buildings are going. We know what, even down to the specific plants, how we're combining the different levels in the the regenerative aspect of that agricultural function, the food processing, the location of water, because we've put in an irrigation system, where are the high points in the land to move the water, things like that.
Yeah, and that's going to shift your whole plan. If you have water, all of a sudden you do this whole plan and your water's all the way over here, well, you're going to want to move that plan closer to the water, because if not, you're doing all this plumbing, which is like taking the dirt and, putting, you're desmontando. What is this word in English? Like deforesting, you're taking away stuff so you can bring water. Like that's not how you plan. So really taking into consideration those elements is going to allow you to develop efficiency, a whole vision.
Right, which is, again, can't emphasize enough the topic of topography, right? Getting a lay of the land, walking the land.
Hydrology.
Initially, right? Identifying solids, lands, water sources, so you can design everything around what's there already.
And it also really depends on how you're going to build like your project. If you're going to be on the grid, like how are you bringing your electricity in? Is it above ground? Is it underground? So for example, in my project, I'm thinking of doing microgrids. And as the initial sense, it's going to be like 3 or 4 homes that have their own microgrid. So we're not bringing electricity all the way into all the spaces. And if one microgrid shuts down, then you have other ones that are kind of like the backups. So we can have access to having electricity in the whole space, but that's not how we're going to start off. And then that's also a component of like stacking functions too, where you want to have more than one resource. So if you have water from your cenotes, you might also want to be connected to like municipality water. One runs out, you want to have microgrids, but being on the grid is also like good, and having different forms of electricity. So that allows you, like, if one system shuts down, you're not screwed. You're not like, what do we do now? You have backups, because we know the world that we live in and climate change is real and things are, breaking down sometimes. And it's okay if you plan for it.
Right, and so this is actually a super important one to discuss, is services, right? On your master plan, identifying and being very, very clear and premeditated with where are you going to have your electric component. Is it going to be on each house and each house harvests its own energy? Or are you going to have a collective energy source? Or are you going to be attached to the grid and create some kind of system for that, which we're working on in the living
And
lab?
also, by producing electricity and connecting, when we're talking about inclusion, when you're an ejido and you give back and you give electricity and energy to the people of the ejido because they're just cable, that makes a lot of sense, because they can't pay for electricity. Right. It's so expensive, and now it's completely legal, which was not like 7 years ago, to actually give or sell electricity as private. So that's a good point.
And you've got internet as well. So we're putting internet services. Then it was like, where do we put the towers? Because it's about what's efficient. And you don't want to have a tower in the middle of your functional area. So we've got areas where, because we're running fiber optic between the towers, you make a decision of which areas do you need Wi-Fi. Not everywhere has to be blanketed in Wi-Fi.
True.
And what reaches the most points about where we're going to place those towers. So we're going to be having 2 towers on our land, one close to the commercial area that does that, and one for the residential area. And then if we keep extending the land, then maybe a third.
Okay, beautiful.
I think an important one here, which we spoke about a lot right now with the ejidos, is the regulations. What are the laws and regulations which you have to abide by? Because we can have the most wonderful ideas, but you might not be allowed to do it. There's a community that just got shut down in Puerto Morelos. They didn't get permitting. They got like some permitting, but not all the permitting, and they're shut down. And they have investors and they have people who want to move in. And so if you get investment and you don't get permitting, it depends on, everybody has those choices, right? There's also some crazy permits that you have to get here. But now they're shut down. And so I'm sure their debt is, increasing, and they're not finishing their project to have some form of sales or events. I don't know what their business pattern is, but the regulations are really important to see and to build your master plan with that in mind. Like, your architects will know that. So how big of a homes can you build? How many homes can you build?
Right. And so, both regulations from an exterior point of view, but also from an interior point of view. There's a saying that it's better that it is implicit, or what is it? Whatever. It's better that you clearly state the rules. Do you remember?
Yeah, explicit than implied.
Explicit, right. It's better something is explicitly shared than implied. So it's better to be very clear, especially with regulations that could come down on you from the outside, but within the community, right? Like John Lucas brought this point up a lot. Like, what are we sharing? What is the community like? Is this my space? Who can or not come on my space, right? Where, like, when can people swim nude in the cenote or not? Things like this that are very important to define, that in a proper master plan would be defined there as well, right? This kind of falls in line with the human element. What are the rules that we live by? How is the system that governs us as an entity, as a unit? We had a question in the back?
Yeah, my question has to do with what you're starting to touch upon now, because what I see is it's been brought up with hints about basically like the cultural aspect of the community and like the spiritual, mental, emotional health of the community. and I think that that's something, like I see it's up there like in the human aspect, but that's something that is for the success and longevity of any community, that needs to be just as much of a priority as logistics and things of that nature. Because what I see is potential for in any community, and Cassandra actually has like experience with this. I'm not sure experience, but in terms of like foresight, if you have a community and you're building and things are going well, or even if you have challenges and you're getting through those things, what happens when the foundation is kind of set already? And then how do you still bring in like new knowledge or like new like other wisdom? Like, would you do that by inviting other people from other communities, or taking like group community focus to other communities? Like, how would you incorporate making sure that it doesn't become insular and then people don't have, they're like limited to their resources and how much they can evolve? Or if you get into a part that's let's say there's a dilemma that's kind of involving the majority of the community, and with all the tools that everyone has, you keep coming to like a stopping point of like not knowing what do you do at that point. Do you invite people in? Do you go, do people need to leave and then go get educated and come back with great knowledge? Like, I think that that's something that's important as well.
Absolutely.
I'm happy you shared this, right? So a big focus of what we talk about, and it happened to us as a project, and I see it happening a lot, and it happens a lot in existing communities, is we focus on the infrastructure, the physical things to create the space, but then we sometimes don't put enough presence on these human element things, right? Like some topics we discussed were, are you going to ask the community or expect the community to put hands on the land? Will you expect them to join a non-violent conflict resolution course once a month, or a community share circle once a week to give everyone the space to be heard, right? So these are part of definitely the human aspects. And what you were saying about new resources coming in, a great success that I noticed in our first project at Ikuma, and that John Luke is very adamant about, is having a hospitality space where people get to come and meet your community, but also bring some of these exterior wisdoms to your community to keep it fresh, let's say, to bring in new and trending things so the space doesn't feel stagnated, which it could at some points, if you're not doing the proper practices, which in our opinion should be completely stated in a proper master plan. When someone's interested in living with you or considering, and you've potentially accepted them, you give them this guidebook, right? The master plan is kind of this guidebook that people will, very technical, but in that reference. Cool, thank you for bringing up that point.
On that.
Yeah, I would also say build a digital community around the physical community, right? Just because it's a physical place, it doesn't mean that we can't connect outside of this. And this can also be implemented within a government system, within a DAO, right? And so everything finds its place and the exchange continues, no matter the people that are at the particular physical place community.
Yeah, we got to add something also. In reality, we didn't talk about nomadism, because the people that now working to build communities, they are nomads. It's easy as a nomad. So I guess, and I can see right now that easy, and that's our point here, it's easier to build a community, a community space, if we are cool and loose about letting people decide themselves how long they would stay there. So we understand well the presence of the people on the land. So within the community, you can, people move. Actually, every people belongs to many communities in reality. So if you talk about living now, we know because of the digital nomad life, where you can spend 3 months in Bali and then 3 months in New York, and that in reality, instead of hoping at one point, the people that within the communities are nomads. So they will still hop, sorry, the accent, hop from one community to the other. And that's how they're going to create the new thing. Because finally, you're gonna go. A person can every year can stay 3 or 4 months in Mother Tree, and then go to his family over there. So it's the community today is not what it used to be before. You know, when you see the community and you see 1,000 people, the community of people is not 1,000. It's not equal to the capacity of the land at one point. Is 12 times more if everybody stay only 1 month per year. So when you modelize that, then you see it's kind of, it brings a lot of good things and it complexifies a little bit. You know,
And I even think, just to add, for your example, as you started, like she comes from another like successful community, and then I think that the definition of successful community in itself is gonna bring, like, it's gonna spawn more people that want to like open source this into other communities. And if you see the table, not many of us are from here, I think, and this is us, like, we come from these successful communities, whether it's like a close like community with your friends, or like her, or from a good school, or your parents. We come from whatever community you come, like big or small, and then since we are those childs of that community, and not necessarily like the parents of that community that we are here for today, we're now building these more communities. So if in theory we do that master plan and we got those communities, there's gonna be a percentages, and that's a human nature that we all different. There's gonna be a percentage of that community that's nomadic, like he's saying, and it's gonna be able to like expand that knowledge that they gain in this community into other ones. So I don't think it's ever gonna get stagnant unless it's a cult, because then no one's leaving, you know? So as long as it's not a cult community, I think it's in the nature of the human element. Like by human nature, you're gonna want to explore more. Like that was how your question got channeled. You're like, okay, if everything goes well, then what else? Let's assume that we got this all good. Then what else? Well, I mean, it's in human nature. There's like example, your very question is an example of this. Even if you're in a good discussion and everything's going well, this discussion, then whenever we put into practice a child birth in that community is gonna have these existential questions, and there's gonna be like, what else? And it's like, I want to teach this everywhere. So I don't worry about that stagnation, because I think it's in the element of the structure that we're building that there's gonna be a percentage of people that are gonna expand these nodes. Because I think they're just nodes, just like the blood.
For some of the stuff there. Yeah, please. The economic model. It's super important.
Can I just say something about what she asked before we go to the next piece? Do you want to say anything, Ben?
Yeah, the other thing I was going to say is relating to selection, if you like. And so I think it's really important to know what you stand for. Because if you're clear in your center, who you are, what your the promise you're making based on what's important to you, know your values, and have that really mapped out, have your story. Like before we really did any of this, we created a presentation, and that was a download that I did within like 2 or 3 days, which is about what was, and you saw maybe a fraction of it, but it was basically what's important to me. What is the, because I have a business brain, what is the problem that I'm solving with this creation, you know? Or another thing is, what is this going to produce? Once you're clear on what you're representing, what you're standing for, then other people can find you that reflect the same belief systems and values, and when you can communicate them clearly and have them documented. So I think it's really important. And then from that place, we created a questionnaire where, by virtue of when people express an interest, we're like, well, thank you. Complete the questionnaire, then you get to know even more by the questions that we ask what we're about. And we're asking questions like, you know, I don't want to go all of them actually here, but, you know, just what is your criminal history? Are you okay with nudity? You know, there's just deep, you know, tell us your life story, you know, deeply personal questions. And then from that, you're going to get an impression of how open are they, you know, what kind of life experiences have they had? And they get to see the same in you as well. And then from there, if there's a fit, you feel it, then, because we've had hundreds of people express an interest, because once you say what you stand for, but of those hundreds, there's some people that don't have the financial ability. There's some people that, can I have a Airbnb there? And they don't really want to live there. And there's all these different things. So you filter that just by the questionnaire. And then after that, then you can have an ask me anything kind of environment of call. And then you've got a short list of, okay, from that, then we'll have a one-on-one for those that are actually genuinely, that are vetted
through the questionnaire that you've set, that you've had interaction, they identify, there's a cohesion, if you like, a likeness, then you have a one-on-one, and then we have a sequence step by step that we take people through that, okay, no, we don't just answer any questions, actually. We direct you to our onboarding.
It's a proper onboarding
process that everybody goes through. And it doesn't matter if I know Oscar and Oscar wants to be on the land, still anyone who's going to be in the land is going to complete that questionnaire and watch those videos. And then what's really cool about it is you actually get to know the people a lot better. I love reading the questionnaires. When people go really deep into it, I'm like, oh, wow, this is a really interesting person. And I'm reading bits of myself in that paper. And so when you've already got that sort of that heart pull of that connection, and it's not about a transaction of thinking I need to sell the plots. It's about there's a coherence in between us energetically, and something to grow with, or share, or anything like that. So I find that's really important.
So for going off of what you asked and what you're sharing, like this is a component of like the invisible structures and like architecting them. So this was just a really important example of how the architecture is of really bringing somebody on. Because when we create boundaries, it's not that we're creating an exclusion or an inclusion. It's just that we're creating that architecture where people can know where their role is and how to either say that we're a member or that we're not. There's an exploratory phase within that boundary where you can feel and they can feel out. And that's why it's important to create those boundaries and just naming what it is, because otherwise then everybody's part of the community. So there's like a saying, right? If everybody's invited, then nobody's invited. So
right, roles and responsibilities, I just added on, as you mentioned. And so I wanted to add on to this concept that we were saying, how do we integrate new people, building a community? Oh, okay. Hey, go ahead.
I'm Carlos, and I'm a professor. I'm teaching right now at 1 month teaching little kids. Elementary school, like music subjects. But I think it's really, really interesting what you said. Making that trust with next step. Not even saying the word impose, educate, trust the community. And then you have the trust. Like searching of the community, family, everything. You have to, we all being educated, we're not mastering. Right? So that's the transmission of education we have to make for the people national education. But you have to think about making new modern education. Right now I'm trying to be like emotional, thinking with the heart, right? It's really hard.
because you don't think with your heart, you connect with your heart.
Well, you have a kind of a brain.
Yeah.
You just brought something up which, I'm a foreigner coming into a new land, and something that was incredibly, ridiculously helpful. And I'm not also a native Spanish speaker, or am I fluent? I have a little, was to have a right-hand man, and that person for me is Hugo, who, when there was conflicts, he would step in. When there was anything like that I was unsure about, he was a problem solver. So I had a right-hand man who was my interface for the cultural differences, that when I got a parking fine, or I needed storage, or I needed all these different things that were cumbersome for me to handle with the language barrier, with the cultural barrier, he was the cohesion that just made that happen really easily. So I think that's super important if you're a foreigner and not from these lands, to find somebody from this land who knows the suppliers, who knows the connections, who knows. John Luke's an example of someone here that's been a very long time. If you have somebody that's, if not from this area, has been in this area a significant amount of time, that knows the lay of the land, that knows who to work with, who not to work with, that knows how to have the street smarts and how to operate and massage and move things. And a person like that's immensely valuable, and even better if you're not a Spanish speaker, that can be bilingual at least.
Team. I added team up here. Very critical as we're thinking about building this out. Who is our team? Who are the people that you can count on? What are their roles and what are their responsibilities? So clearly identifying and laying this out will save you a long, arduous process by being able to hold accountability more effectively.
Kind of like a sponsor, or it's something like that. It's a specific role that's, you're not just imposing your team, like you're not just imposing your structure. I think it's a really important thing when you're integrating into a new culture,
you don't impose strictly your culture and their culture, because then you can be like, who the hell is this person coming in and telling
Like
us
an
what to do?
ambassador almost.
And with me, something that really it's natural to me, but it's not necessarily natural to everybody, is I went and worked the land with the workers. I got sweaty. Every single path I put in with my own machete. I connected with the workers, and now they're like, they want to be there, and we want to keep them because there's a strong bond that was much bigger or deeper than if I was just, hey, you're my workers, go clear that, do that. It's like, no, I stand with them, So I think it's
Proper leadership from the front. Yeah, nice. So I have a question for you guys along this line of creating the community, building it out, creating a digital community, right? In our Discord, we each have a channel where you are starting to update updates of your community, what's going on, pictures of things, coming soon. I know Nathan's on it. So this goes into creating this space where people can connect. And a question for me directly to you guys was, one model that we've considered is a membership model for people that would like to visit these kinds of communities with the whole nomad fever increasing by the day. Would you guys be open to something like that where people have access to one part of the community, one or two houses or multiple houses that allow for people that have been properly onboarded, properly vetted, to come and spend a month, a few weeks, a few days even, because they are part of this process, allowing to bring in and integrate new things to the community and create a hospitality influx, let's say, of income for the space. Would this be something that's appealing to you guys?
In a slightly different structure, we've already got that built in.
Okay, beautiful.
Okay, so the idea is that we've built amenities far beyond the needs of our community. So we are building amenities far beyond the needs. Like our gym is ginormous, wellness area is ginormous relative to the number of residents that live in the land. Because it was never intended just to be for the residents. It was intended to be for our residents and neighbors. Because one of the things about infrastructure when building communities, often you're in the middle of the jungle, down the end of the road, it's 10 kilometers or 20 kilometers to go get groceries. And so we've got in Balambalam where we're at, there's like 150 properties around us, of which they're not master plan. They're all just individual plots of people living in a fragmented kind of way. And so our intention was to provide amenities that they could utilize so that, one, we become a hub for connection of people coming in, two, we're generating revenue for the community, we're providing them amenities and services, and that's also why, I guess the plan was to create an outcome that would be sustaining not just for our little bubble, but sustaining for those surrounding us as well.
Yeah, for me, it's similar. Absolutely. Like I see these regenerative communities and Tierras Nativas as an access point for people to come and learn what it means to live in community. What does it mean to be regenerative? What does it mean to have wellness in my life, not just food? So those practices this is what I like about this area. We have access to this communities. The community that I lived in was like 5 hours away, and then you had to get on a boat or you had to hike for 2 hours. It's not very accessible. So these two spaces are very accessible, which allows us to have an influx of people. So they're kind of like these big educational spaces so that we can start shifting consciousness. So absolutely, I think that's the goal for community living. Otherwise, we are living in these bubbles, which is what communities were doing before. They were like, we're off grid, we're sustainable, we don't need anybody, and that didn't impact the planet, right? We have to be the bridges, and that's what's gonna actually shift something.
Right. This is the shift to regenerative versus just the evolution has been the green movement. Hey, there's green stuff, we should take care of it.
Well,
the sustainability movement. Hey, we're making an impact. Let's be mindful of it. And now this transition to regenerative, where it's not just about our impact. We've made a lot of damage, and we're conscious of everything else around us. Let's also reach out there and make a positive impact.
And so, a funny question that somebody asked me in the last conference I was in, they're like, "Are you going to be sustainable, where you can grow all your food and everything?" And it's like, well, to a certain degree, but I want to be able to trade with other communities and other lands in Mexico, and I can't grow everything. if everything closes down, yes, we're probably going to have like the same kind of food all the time, but like I'm not going to grow rice where I live, you know? So you have to kind of think about that way, which is a lot of what we've been talking about are those relationships that you're going to have with the local farmers and with other communities that have, like for me, Chiapas is a super important place because they have a lot of cacao. And for me, cacao is a really important aspect of my personal life. And I think for a really good introduction for a lot of people to connect with their heart-centered space and shift consciousness about how we can gather around and really commune in a heart space.
We're having a cacao plantation.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
So I open the floor for a few more minutes for any closing remarks, any last questions. It's 4:15. We did awesome today. You guys, anybody else? Questions? Ask about master plans, about any topics.
Actually, just to get back on the relationship with the environment, neighbors and stuff, for me, basically, the natives or the people on the land are basically part of the community, the project itself. So we cannot just build our and then how would I deal with these guys? So it should be part of it since the beginning. I think that's the only way it could be sustainable. Otherwise, we're colonizing it again.
Right. And somewhat depends on their desire to be involved as well. Like I think every Hito is going to be different. Our Hito is actually quite hands off, but they have certain provisions about that they want. Like all the plots, the minimum plot size is 2,500 square meters for that Hito. So I think there's just certain things that, and then it's good to present your master plan to the Hito. You know, if you've got that sort of relationship with them and have someone who could be an interface, in their case, if they're not Spanish speaking, whatever, I think it could be because there's rules around titling and also subdividing, where effectively they're going to need to subdivide it if you want to go down that path, as opposed to you subdividing. It's just a much more expensive way to go about it. So anyway, sidetrack. But yeah, the other thing is around the economic model is to factor in not just economic goals and like the well-being goals, if you like, and not just the community, your individual's interest, but the community's interest in terms of your economic model, and how you're building all those structures and everything like that, and utilization of those structures. So think of that like we did in terms of not just for your people, maybe your neighbours, consider your neighbours in that design phase as well.
The comment you made, but it costs more if you're working yourself, they do it for you. When you
go to title the land, if your intention is to go to title the land, it's kind of like if it's all right. It's almost if you have the relationship with the Hito and the Hito goes, oh, it's already subdivided and it's already got all these buildings on it. They present it. It's a different way of going about it as opposed to if you're applying for titling each. So if you go as a complete everything subdivided and the Hito created it that way with the corporation, well, it's their land. And then when you present it to RAN, it's a different interaction as opposed to subdividing and then going to do construction and everything after from a permitting perspective and things like that. Because you come under a different jurisdiction then once it's been titled.
Cool.
Well, I'll just go off of that, which is, the being culturally engaging in the cultural norms that are there. Every single land and area is going to have a different culture, and weaving those cultures sometimes is really difficult. So just being receptive, like observe, listen, and then interact. Like the English language is a very direct language. You know, we're like, this is what I want to do. This is where we're going. And in Mexican culture, it's very different. It's like, hey, let's sit down. Let's have a meal. Let's get to know each other on a personal level. And then you can talk about business. So, and every country is going to be different. And just lastly, I think that what I would like to share with you guys is if you're doing a master plan, like I'm super open to staying connected. I'm sure Nathan is as well. Like we're in this together, and just also look for your experts in the field, you know, like you're not on your own. There's a lot of resources out there. I think RegenTribe is doing an amazing job at like collecting those resources so that we can really catalyze this movement. So I just totally commend you guys for showing up, being a bridge for people who already have land. I mean, I know so many people who have land and they're like, oh, I want a community, but I don't know what to do. And so, it's difficult sometimes, but it's not that difficult. You just have to start. And you guys are really creating a really beautiful way
holding
to do
space
that.
for this to happen, right? Our first phase is the Discord, you guys. We'll share the link. Each one of their projects has their own channel where if anyone asks a question, when they have the time to log in, they'll see it and be able to get back to you. It makes everything accessible to each other. We also have resources there where anything we find that helps us or that a project is shared with us, we'll be sharing there. Anything that anyone else finds, same, bringing in exterior knowledge as well as interior knowledge.
And one last thing is that we're going to be hosting a conference here in Paledora, March 25th to the 28th. RegenTribe, Tierras Nativas, Brad, who's the producer over there. And it's all about community living. So if you want to know more, come. Nathan is going to be a part of it. I'm going to be a part of it. So we're really bringing together experts and other community projects and going to be exhibiting that. So we're going to talk about invisible structures, which are the social structures, the physical structures, all the regenerative practices. We're going to be talking about DAOs and NFTs, and what does regeneration mean? Right. So that's March 25th, Tribalize.
And we're going to dance.
And it's going to be here, yeah. We're going to do ceremony together, so let's commune and hang out and continue the conversation because I also want to get to know you guys.
Beautiful, guys. Well, thank you very much. Another beautiful workshop, co-creating regenerative communities. It takes all of us, right? It takes a tribe to build the tribe. And this is the space that we're holding here to bring together these bright minds, bright questions, and the potential tribes to build more of these around the world. So thank you, guys.
Thank you. I know. What a lovely surprise.
All right, guys. Well, thank you for tuning in. Here we go. Yeah. Thank you for tuning in. Co-creating regenerative communities here at Paledora. Every Friday for the next few weeks. Tribalize at the end of this month here in Tulum. And stay tuned. Ask questions. Alexa, we miss you. And everyone join the Discord. Our link is on Instagram. I'm going to add it here to the bottom right now. Boom. Regen.tribe. Okay, guys, follow the Instagram on the bottom, other side, at RegenTribe, and stay tuned for more things coming up and creating more communities around the world.